Chapter 342. As the leader of this operation, Su-gon had 20 cavalrymen protecting him with their lives. But even so, he had still sustained severe injuries. The current Su-gon was no longer as competitive as he used to be. At this point, he could only hope that Wang Chong and the others wouldn't fall into the same trap as them. Bullshit. Xiling and the others are our only hope at the moment. Do you all wish to die? You may wish to die, but I don't. Xiling. Huang Yongtu abruptly leaped into the air and beckoned to Wang Chong and Bai Xiling. He had long forgotten that Bai Xiling was still a fickle and traitorous slut in his eyes. Ha ha ha, pass down my orders. No one is to shoot arrows. Let him shout. No one is to stop him. At the back of the formation, Iron Cloak Li roared with laughter. Yes, Chief. Wait a moment, don't make it too obvious. Have the bandits on the east side prepare for battle. Yes. A few highwaymen immediately rode off to carry out the orders. Even though they were highwaymen, they had the ability to pass down orders, to command, to defend, and to shoot arrows. They were no longer ordinary highwaymen, but soldiers. On the other side, Wang Chong and Bai Xiling also heard Huang Yongtu's voice. Even though Wang Chong and Bai Xiling didn't get along with Huang Yongtu, they couldn't help but feel ripples in their hearts upon hearing Huang Yongtu's desperate plea. Xiling, do you know how to shoot arrows? Wang Chong suddenly asked. I do. Why? Bai Xiling replied. For the moment, she couldn't fathom Wang Chong's intentions. Shoot an arrow for me and bring something over. Wang Chong said calmly. His gaze swept across the Iron Cloak highwaymen before him, and he had a rough idea of what to do. What Su-gon and Huang Yongtu need right now is to stabilize the morale of their troops. On top of that, after fighting for so long, they have suffered quite a few casualties. Even Su-gon and Zhang Lin are injured. We need to replenish them with healing pills. Understood. Bai Xiling looked at the youth beside her, who was younger than her, and her beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of admiration. Bai Xiling felt an indescribable admiration for this young man who had always been secretive and never even mentioned his background, yet had the white-hoofed shadow, the royal steed of the white-hoofed shadow. No matter what problem or predicament he encountered, he always seemed to have a solution, always had his own ideas, and never panicked. There was always a calming power in him. Following such a person, even if they were in prison, they couldn't help but forget. This young man possessed a strength that others could rely on and trust in. Bring me the arrow. Bai Xiling waved her hand, and soon, someone handed over a big iron bow. In the Bai family, Bai Xiling was one of the few people who dabbled in archery, and her cultivation was very high. Wang Chong had asked the right person. The army had simple charcoal pens for writing envelopes, which were used in emergencies. Using the unit of measurement, every 10 soldiers would have one of these things. Wang Chong tore a piece of cloth and swiftly wrote a few lines of words on it. Then, he passed all of the recovery pills he had on him to Bai Xiling. Boom! In the next moment, Bai Xiling drew her bow and shot Wang Chong's letter along with the recovery pills. The arrow traversed a distance of 100 zhang and struck the tree behind Huang Yongtu. The white feather of the arrow trembled in the air. Bastards! Aren't these fellows being too arrogant? 500 feet away, a savage-looking bandit could not help but spit fiercely on the ground when he saw this scene, and cursed. Even though the military advisor and leader had ordered them not to touch them for the time being, these fellows were being too arrogant. However, these fellows were too arrogant, treating them as if they were nothing. We have so many people on our side, why should we be afraid of them? A spit from each of us is more than enough to drown them. Isn't the military advisor being a little too cautious? Indeed. They're just 2 kids who are still wet behind the ears, how can they be leaders? Brothers, take them down. Kill the men and have fun with the women. A commotion immediately broke out among the bandits. Mountain bandits and bandits had always been free, undisciplined, and lawless people. If they were facing a powerful enemy, they might still obey the orders of Iron Cloak Li and the others. But now, Wang Chong and the others only had a few dozen of them, and they were led by 2 kids. For a moment, the bandits had forgotten about the might of Wang Chong and the others when they wiped out the bandits, and they were itching to make a move. "Chief, the brothers of the bandits who just joined us are starting to get restless." A valiant-looking highwayman suddenly pointed to the distance and said, "They forgot about the orders we gave earlier. Should we go over and restrain them?" "There's no need for that." The one who said those words wasn't Iron Cloak Li but the military advisor Zhouan. "Let them be. They won't learn to be obedient if they don't suffer some losses. If some of them die, they will be more obedient. At the same time, we can also test the strength of this group of soldiers and consume some of their strength," Zhouan said emotionlessly as he stroked his beard. According to the intelligence they had received, there was a group of soldiers who were well versed in the means of bandits, and none of the bandits were able to escape from them. The group on the slope clearly wasn't as formidable, and there was nothing special about them. From the looks of it, it could only be the group on the other side. The highwayman hesitated for a moment before turning to look at Iron Cloak Li. Iron Cloak Li's face remained impassive, and he simply nodded slightly. Understanding the other party's intentions, the highwaymen fell silent. Based on the intentions of Zhouan and the military advisor, they intended to let the Eastern highwaymen have a taste of Wang Chang's skills. However, things didn't develop as they expected. "Xiling, it seems like they have a problem with that arrow of yours?" Wang Chong immediately sensed the restlessness of the bandits. "Why? Are you going to surrender?" Bai Xiling chuckled softly. Unknowingly, she had been infected by Wang Chang's mood. In such a precarious situation, it was impossible to laugh. But when she was with Wang Chong, she couldn't help but forget this point. "How can that be? Since they want to make a move, we might as well fulfill their wish. There's no need for them to make a move. Let's head over ourselves." Wang Chong smiled. "What do you intend to do?" Bai Xiling rolled her eyes at Wang Chong, and even Wang Chong couldn't help but fall into a daze. "First echelon, step out. Second echelon, get ready." Wang Chong waved his hand, and 5 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen immediately stepped out. Their auras were in sync, and their steps were in sync. They were like unsheathed swords, giving off a feeling of sharpness. "Xiling, I'll have to trouble you to come with us." As Wang Chong spoke, he unsheathed his sword and pointed it at the sky. Rumble. The next moment, like a silver vase breaking, the first echelon of Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, along with Wang Chong and Bai Xiling, roared out like dragons emerging from the sea. Although they were only 7 people, they exuded the aura of an army of thousands. In that instant, it was as if the entire earth was trembling beneath their feet. This was the first time Bai Xiling had seen Wang Chang's troops move out. They had all received their troops on the same day, and they were all of the same strength and realm, but the 5 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen under Wang Chong gave off a completely different feeling. It was no longer the feeling of being a bystander when he and Bai Xiling surrounded the bandits. Instead, it was a soul-stirring feeling. It was as if the troops they had received belonged to 2 completely different armies. Hong long long. With the neighing of their steeds, Wang Chang's troops increased their speed. Even when they were about to reach the Iron Cloak highwaymen, they showed no signs of slowing down. Waves of tyrannical yuan qi surged into the bodies of those warhorses, and then turned into rippling martial arts halos under the warhorses. In an instant, the aura of the 5 cavalrymen increased by more than 2-fold. The might of a cavalry could only be brought out through a relentless charge. As long as their steeds did not stop, they would be the strongest force on the battlefield. No one could withstand the charge of a cavalry of the same level, and this included the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Wang. Seeing that there were only 7 of them, but the Great Tang army was still advancing relentlessly without any signs of stopping, the bandits finally fell into disarray. Damn it, do these fellows really think that they can deal with the 600 of us with just the 7 of them? They're committing suicide. Bastards, these fellows are crazy. Careful, careful. Amidst the neighing of Ney's steed, the 7 of them charged right into the midst of the bandits like a bolt of lightning. The furious curses soon turned into chaotic screams and shouts. No one could withstand the charge of 7 true martial realm experts. The combined might of their steeds and their riders was far beyond what these bandits could withstand. Peng peng peng. The hooves of the steeds crushed the bones of the 7 bandits, sending them flying high into the air. Before they could even land on the ground, they were already deader than dead. In just a single clash, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had lost 7 of their men. But this was far from the end. The might of a cavalry didn't just lie in their first charge, but in their relentless charge. Nay! Ah! Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Be careful! The scene was in chaos. The charge of Wang Chong and the others was only the beginning of the first wave of attacks. In the next moment, spears and swords rained down. The bandits only felt their vision blur, and before they could even react, they'd already been pierced through by the iron spear and perished. The mountain bandits who lived in the mountains and robbed the passing merchants were no match for the well-trained and battle-hardened regular soldiers. A single cavalryman might not amount to much, and the threat they posed to the mountain bandits was rather limited. However, when 2, 3, 4, 5. When a group of cavalrymen appeared and coordinated with each other, no bandits who only knew how to fight one-on-one would be able to stand against them. Pu. The metal spears were as dense as rain, stabbing out like poisonous dragons, throwing the surrounding bandits into the air. The cold light that flickered in the air was like the scythe of the god of death, taking away one life after another. Blood sprayed in the air, and miserable screams rang out one after another. The bandits who were still clamoring madly a moment ago had suddenly become prey for the 7 of them. In just a short period of time, more than 20 bandits had died in the first wave of attacks from the 7 of them. On the other hand, not a single person on Wang Chang's side was injured. This was the might of the Tang dynasty's cavalry. Chapter 343. Kill them. Kill them. Don't let those fellows get away. We have the advantage in numbers, we'll crush them to death. Kill. On the official road to the east, although the bandits had lost more than 20 people in an instant, the continuous deaths had also aroused the viciousness in the hearts of the bandits. If Wang Chang's group had hundreds or even thousands of men, the bandits might still be fearful. However, there were only 7 of them. No matter how many men they had, it was impossible for them to stand against the 600 to 700 of them. In an instant, hundreds of bandits swarmed over from all directions, reducing the space that Wang Chang's group could operate in. Even if they had to exhaust Wang Chang's group to death. What should we do? Amidst the dense crowd, Bai Siling turned to look at Wang Chong. Her sword moved swiftly, and the war steed beneath her feet pulsed with halos, sending the surrounding bandits flying. Bai Siling was a true martial realm expert, and her strength was on par with Marchioness Yi and Wang Zhuyan. However, even she felt the pressure from such a dense encirclement. Her smooth forehead was filled with sweat, and her stamina and origin energy had been greatly depleted. Don't panic. Wang Chong said calmly as he observed the movements in the surroundings. Of the group of 7, his cultivation realm was the lowest, still at origin energy realm. But in this chaotic battle, Wang Chong had an easier time dealing with the situation than Bai Siling. This was the environment of the battlefield, and Wang Chong's bloodline and bones had long gotten used to being surrounded by enemies. Furthermore, it wasn't as if he couldn't make use of the chaos. At the very least, Wang Chong's sword Qi of life slaying became even more difficult to defend against in this environment. Index finger, middle finger, ring finger. Wang Chong's 10 fingers moved in turns. Strands of extremely dense sword Qi crisscrossed the air, constantly shooting out and shooting into the forehead, neck, and heart of the bandits. Moreover, there were many times when Wang Chang's sword chi was clearly aimed at a single bandit, but in the next moment, these sword chi as thick as a finger would pass over that bandit's shoulder and shoot into the body of another bandit 10 meters away. This kind of pointing and attacking made Wang Chang's lethality increase exponentially. Among the 7 of them, in terms of the number of kills, perhaps only Bai Siling, who was the strongest and had the highest realm, could compare with him. Almost there. Wang Chong kept his eyes and ears open, sensing the situation of the bandits surrounding him. When he felt that the situation was about right, Wang Chong sat on the back of his horse and clenched his right hand into a fist. He raised it up high, leaving only his thumb sticking out and pointing it at the sky. Boom! Just when the bandits were about to drag Wang Chang's group into the sea of people and completely surround them, the 5 cavalrymen of the second echelon suddenly leaped out from the rear of the formation. It was as if a mountain had collapsed. Boom! They covered a distance of 50 zhang in a single leap. The 5 cavalrymen of the second echelon were like 5 sharp blades, charging into the sea of bandits with an unstoppable momentum. The same thing happened once more. Before the charging cavalrymen, one bandit after another was knocked into the air, sent flying by the true martial halo. The steel cavalry's speed could no longer be measured by their own cultivation realm and strength. Under their high-speed charge, their strength had increased by at least 3 realms. At the very least, before their speed decreased, none of the bandits would be able to block their blades. Ah! Like 5 invisible blades plowing into the bandits, screams rang out incessantly. The encirclement that had just closed up was instantly torn apart by the charge of the regular cavalrymen of the imperial court. Let's go! When the 5 cavalrymen of the second echelon had broken through the encirclement, the first and second echelons converged, forming a line of 10 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. With a loud boom, they pierced through the bandits' defensive line from the inside out. Like a flood dragon, they charged forward, leaving behind a trail of corpses. Damn it! Don't let those bastards get away. After them. Kill them, thought the bandits were so furious that they felt like their lungs were about to explode. So many of them had died, but not only did they not manage to kill a single person, they even allowed them to escape. How could the bandits take this? Whoosh! A dense mass of bandits chased after Wang Chang's group. The bandits with warhorses were the first to bear the brunt of the attack. They charged out from the crowd, galloping in pursuit. 10 cavalrymen and 2 children. Not a single one of them had died, but they had killed at least 40 bandits. At the back of the crowd, the Iron Cloak highwaymen and the military advisor frowned silently. Even though they intended to use Wang Chang's group to intimidate the bandits, and at the same time, test the strength of Wang Chang's group, the loss of so many bandits in a single encounter still left them with a heavy heart. This group of cavalrymen possesses frightening destructive power. The Iron Cloak highwayman spread open his right palm, and a miniature iron cloak floated in the air, flexing and flexing in his hand. Cavalrymen have to charge on their own to unleash their full potential. This is also the reason why I tried my best to intercept them and keep them in the forest, preventing them from entering the main road. The Iron Cloak highwayman's military advisor stroked his beard as he explained calmly. But after a brief pause, a subtle glint flashed across Zhou En's eyes. However, this group of cavalrymen is indeed stronger than the one we intercepted earlier. As the saying goes, soldiers are fearless, generals are fearless. The same soldier would behave differently under different generals. Under the command of a defensive and conservative general, this soldier might appear timid. Under the command of a brave and resolute general, this soldier would become fearless and unstoppable. This was the influence of a general's disposition and the environment. At the very least, the 10 cavalrymen led by Wang Chong gave him a completely different feeling from Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others on the slope. It seems like it's him. A thought flashed across Zhou En's mind. He had already confirmed that it was the group on the main road to the east who had wiped out the bandits and forced them to submit to him. Boss, the 40 bandits aren't a match for them. Send another 60 brothers over. Zhou suddenly turned to the leader on the boulder and said. In Zhou An's words, the only ones worthy of being called brothers were his own men. 60 bandits, 40 bandits, and the other bandits on foot. Their numbers were already several times that of Wang Chang's group. The fact that they were able to dispatch so many men to deal with him was more than enough to show how much importance Zhou An placed on Wang Chang's group. On the boulder, the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen nodded silently. In the next moment, the 60-odd Iron Cloak highwaymen bellowed and whipped their horses. They circled around the sea of bandits and emerged from the forest on the right. Shi Yujian leaped onto the main road and followed closely behind the bandits. The horsemanship and fighting prowess of these bandits were decent, on par with the official army. With so many of them, they were more than enough to crush Wang Chang's group. They're following us. On the main road, a cloud of dust billowed as the war steeds galloped. Bai Xiling had been paying close attention to the movements behind her. Among the bandits and highwaymen, there were quite a few tall and muscular Turks, Goryans, and short but ferocious Uzan tribesmen. In this wave, Wang Chong had gathered at least 80 to 90 bandits and highwaymen with him. Honestly speaking, this was the first time that Bai Xiling had experienced such a situation. She was so nervous that her palms were drenched in sweat. With so many people around, Bai Xiling wasn't confident that she could deal with them at all. Don't panic. It's just 80 to 90 bandits, and they aren't even part of the official army. They aren't a threat to us yet. Wang Chong said calmly. The army he led had even triumphed over invaders that were several times the number of bandits and highwaymen, let alone a bunch of bandits and highwaymen. In the battlefield by the borders of the Tang dynasty, it was normal for such a numerical comparison to be expected. As a lady, Bai Xiling couldn't help but feel flustered. However, to Wang Chong, he was more than familiar with such a situation. On a battlefield with complicated terrain, for a commander who was truly good at leading troops, numbers sometimes didn't mean anything. Chase. You won't be able to escape. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, I'll catch you all. Ha ha ha, that woman is blaming me. Don't you dare snatch her from me. Kill them all, strange howls sounded. Seeing how Wang Chong and the others were being chased by them, the bandits' faces contorted as they laughed excitedly. Nay. After chasing for dozens of li, intense and high-spirited neighs of horses suddenly sounded from the two sides of the mountain. While the bandits were caught off guard, a well-disguised warhorse suddenly leaped out from the forest on the right. With lightning speed, it charged into the most vulnerable area between the 40 bandits and the 60 highwaymen. Rumble. Riding on the terrain, the horse charged down the slope. Its speed and momentum were even more terrifying than charging on flat ground. What kind of tiger was the scariest? The tiger that descended the mountain was the scariest. Similarly, what kind of cavalry was the scariest? The cavalry that charged down the slope was the scariest. That kind of momentum was like an avalanche, unstoppable and unstoppable. Rumble. Before the dozens of bandits and highwaymen could react, they were hit by the cavalry that Wang Chong had set up on the slope. Ah! Shrill screams pierced through the air. The long line was instantly pierced through. At least 30 bandits and highwaymen were caught off guard and died under the charge and thrust of the iron spears of the 10 Tang dynasty cavalry. The originally orderly team was instantly thrown into chaos. Now's the time. Counterattack. Chapter 344. Rumble. The earth quaked. No one could describe the tremors caused by the 30 Tang dynasty cavalry charging into the bandit ranks in an arrow formation. The neighing of the horses, the screams of pain, the clashing of metal, and the cracking of bones all mixed together. In the moment of battle, more than 20 mounted bandits had their bones crushed, and even more were sent flying into the sky by the fierce impact. The power of the military's warhorses was on full display at this moment. Whether it was the sturdiness of their bones, tenacity, or strength, the warhorses of the military far surpassed the tamed horses these bandits and highwaymen could casually get. Wang Chang's intention of luring the bandits and highwaymen over and forming a long line on the official road was now clear. Although the power of the cavalry was greater in open terrain, this was only a small group of cavalry. However, it was only a small group of cavalrymen, and they were able to display their greatest power in narrow terrain. The official road to the west could only allow 6 warhorses to gallop side by side. No matter how many bandits and highwaymen there were, they could only move 6 warhorses on the official road. In the face of the stronger and more coordinated Tang Empire, the bandits and highwaymen were no match for the bandits and highwaymen. Nay! The 40 bandits and highwaymen were like a line of weeds in a field, waiting to be harvested. Thud! 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 The spears of the 30 Tang dynasty cavalry were like dragons. Not a single person could stop them. When the front line of the bandits collapsed, the rear line was completely unable to stop them. Almost every bandit was attacked by 6 or 7 Tang dynasty cavalry at the same time. When the 30 cavalry swept past, they left behind corpses strewn all over the place. For both Wang Chong and his 30 cavalry, this sort of battle was a walk in the park. But for Bai Siling, as well as the bandits and highwaymen who had never experienced this kind of cruel battle, it was unimaginable. This was especially so for the bandits and highwaymen. The 30 great Tang cavalrymen were like 30 killing machines. Their united momentum was like the eruption of a mountain torrent. Just a single glance at them was enough to send them into an unforgettable nightmare. In just an instant, the 40 bandits who had given chase were corpses strewn all over the official road and the 2 sides of the hill. Blood and severed limbs were scattered all over the ground. The might of a cavalry of this scale could no longer be described by their numbers alone. In the open plains, a 10,000-strong cavalry could take on an army of 300,000-strong infantry alone, and they could even penetrate and defeat the enemy repeatedly. Those who did not understand this would be plunged into a nightmare. Kill! Before the 60 Iron Cloak highwaymen could react, Wang Chang's 30 Tang dynasty cavalry had already merged with the 10 cavalrymen who had been lying in ambush on the hill. With the addition of the 10 cavalrymen, the already formidable force was even more formidable. Hong Long! Without the slightest hesitation, the 40 cavalrymen charged right into the midst of the 60 Iron Cloak highwaymen after killing the 40 bandits. In just a few breaths' time, the entire process had been completed. Nay! Steeds collided with steeds, spears clashed with blades, and the same scene repeated itself once more. The strength of the Iron Cloak highwaymen surpassed that of the bandits, and in fact, they were on par with the regular army of the Tang dynasty. But in an intense battlefield where 2 armies were clashing with one another, this word meant the difference between the heavens and the earth. Boom! One warhorse after another was thrown into the air by the ferocious collisions. Both the rider and the horse flew several meters into the air as if they were weightless. But before they could land, spears after spear darted through the air like dragonflies, piercing into the formation behind them. Blood splattered like a fountain under the sunlight. Along with the blood, the bandits of the Iron Cloak highwaymen could be seen splattering as well. The powerful highwaymen who were ferocious and belligerent would never be able to match up to the well-trained Great Tang cavalry. Peng 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 peng. Wave after wave of horse bandits fell as the dense forest of spears pierced forward. At this moment, a simple yet effective battle formation was far more effective than any exquisite martial arts. Let's go. Retreat. 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 We've fallen into an ambush. We aren't a match for them, an extremely terrified voice resounded on the official road. Even though the 60 Iron Cloak highwaymen were far stronger than the bandits, they only managed to fend off the assault for a moment before collapsing completely. Those who had never experienced it would never be able to imagine the fearsome might of the charge of 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen. The 30 Iron Cloak highwaymen at the front line didn't even manage to hold on for a moment before they were crushed to smithereens by the might of the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen. The momentum they exerted was so overwhelming that they couldn't even muster the slightest bit of will to resist. The difference in strength was too great. This wasn't just a matter of strength. The might of the charge of 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen was far beyond what the highwaymen could withstand. Da. Seeing the collapse of the cavalrymen before them, the Iron Cloak highwaymen at the very back were the first to turn tail and flee. Charge! Wang Chang's gaze turned cold as he ordered without any hesitation. In the heat of the battlefield, once one side's cavalrymen faltered in fear and turned tail to flee, it would be impossible for them to escape even if they wanted to. Theoretically speaking, everyone was riding on steeds, so their speed should be about the same. But reality would never be the same as theory. Once the charge of the cavalrymen began, their speed would only grow faster and faster until they reached a peak and couldn't stop anymore. On the other hand, the side that turned tail to flee would go from extreme speed to extreme stillness, starting from zero again. This meant that their speed couldn't compare to Wang Chang's group at all. Ah! Amidst the screams of agony, the great Tang cavalrymen chased after the highwaymen. Their spears glowed with the luster of halos, making them look like pythons and dragons. With a single strike, they pierced through the bodies of the highwaymen and flung them into the air. Pu. Before the highwayman's body could even fall to the ground, dozens of cavalrymen had already pierced through his body one after another, causing him to fall to the side of the road. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, the short 30 zhang path became the highwayman's nightmare. One after another, the highwaymen were chased down and stabbed to the side of the road. Some of the highwaymen tried to retaliate before their deaths, stopping abruptly in an attempt to drag others down with them. But what awaited them were 34 spear tips. Wherever the cavalrymen passed, both men and horses died, leaving behind only corpses. Hurry up and flee to the top of the mountain. Someone finally realized that they would never be a match for Wang Chang's group on the flat road. Squeezing his horse's abdomen, he and his steed became one and leaped up the mountain. Charge! Without thinking, several cavalrymen leaped high into the air and charged into the forest, intending to chase after the highwaymen. There's no need for that. Let them escape. Wang Chong raised an arm and said calmly. In the next moment, the cavalrymen who had already chased the highwaymen into the forest retreated. Strict obedience. This was the most basic rule of the army. Wang Chang's commanding ability had won everyone's trust. From this moment onwards, they had completely regarded him as their leader, not just because of the imperial court's orders. Don't chase a cornered enemy. They're just a few highwaymen, nothing to worry about. Let them go. Wang Chong pulled on the reins and sat on the back of his steed as he said calmly. His expression was indifferent, his eyes wise, and his entire body exuded an aura of extreme calmness. At this moment, even Wang Chong himself did not realize that he no longer resembled a 17-year-old youth. Instead, he resembled a calm and seasoned general. Yes, Lord. The cavalrymen replied respectfully. Their expressions and actions made it seem as though they were meeting a high-ranking general of the army. At the same time, everyone suddenly realized that the battle had ended. Other than the few highwaymen who had escaped, the rest of the bandits and highwaymen had been wiped out. The several hundred zhang long official road was filled with the corpses of bandits and highwaymen. There were Turks, Uzan, Gogurians, Abbasid Caliphate, and Karak Spazinu. Their corpses were piled up into a small mountain. Fresh blood flowed from the corpses, dyeing the ground crimson. Severed limbs, dismembered arms, intestines, and fresh blood were everywhere. The air was filled with the pungent stench of blood. Ugh! Bai Xiling hadn't noticed it earlier, but now that the battle was over, she couldn't help but vomit. Even though she was known to be a valiant figure on par with the likes of Marchioness Yi and Wang Zhuyan, she was still a lady. She had never seen such a cruel sight before. Bai Xiling's body convulsed, and the moment she vomited, she found it hard to stop. Furthermore, the pungent stench of blood in the air made it even more unbearable for her. Hua! Dismounting from her steed, Bai Siling rushed to the side of the official road and vomited violently. All of the food she had eaten over the past few days, along with her yellow bile, came gushing out. She even vomited to the point that tears were flowing down her face. This should be your first time, right? You'll get used to it soon. A voice sounded behind her. Wang Chong had unknowingly dismounted from his steed and walked over. No matter how valiant a lady was, there was still a weak side to her. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen Bai Siling vomiting. How did you do it? Bai Siling tried her best to suppress the urge to vomit, but the moment her hands touched the ground, another mouthful of bile gushed out. What? Wang Chong was taken aback. How did you do it? Why aren't you vomiting? Kneeling on the ground, Bai Siling asked. Wang Chong was taken aback, and a dazed look appeared on his face. It was normal for an ordinary person to vomit the first time they killed someone. Did he really not know how to do it? Of course he knew how to do it. Just that, it wasn't now. Chapter 345. In his previous life, he had never even killed a chicken, needless to say, a human. But humans change. Life shaped a person, and it also changed a person. In his previous life, when he caught the eye of a few seniors in the military and was promoted, Wang Chong killed for the first time in his life. Looking at the red and white blood flowing out, Wang Chong vomited even more violently than Bai Siling did. But when his comrades fell one after another, and the familiar land of the 9 continents burned to ashes, Wang Chong never vomited again. After vomiting out all of his weakness, all that was left in Wang Chong's heart was determination. But these were things that Wang Chong wouldn't tell Bai Siling. Compared to the mission on his shoulders and the predicament he was in, all of his personal pride and disgrace, gains and losses, and even his feelings and fears, were insignificant. Siling, it's not that I won't vomit like you, but there are some things that are more important than these severed limbs that you see. If we can't find a way to defeat those highwaymen and bandits, the ones lying on this road would be us, Su Gan, and Huang Yongtu's corpses. Wang Chong said slowly as he looked at Bai Siling's back. Bai Siling was taken aback for a moment before she slowly raised her head to look at the determined face of the young man behind her. For some reason, Bai Siling suddenly felt an indescribable sense of attraction from the young man behind her. In that instant, even the disgust in her heart subsided. Let's go, time waits for no one. Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others are still waiting for us. Standing behind Bai Siling, Wang Chong stretched out his hand and said. Bai Siling subconsciously reached out a hand and grabbed Wang Chong's palm. She felt a sense of security and dependence that she had never felt before. In a trance, Bai Siling had forgotten that this lofty and indifferent youth in front of her was actually much younger than her. Go! With a flick of the whip, the 40 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, along with Wang Chong and Bai Siling, charged toward the Iron Cloak Highwayman leader. This is bad. This is bad. On the right side of the mountain path, 2 stallions suddenly emerged from the forest, and 2 bandits leaped down from the backs of their steeds. Frightened out of their wits, they kneeled before Iron Cloak Li. My brother was killed, speak clearly. How many people were killed? Where are the others? Standing on the boulder, Iron Cloak Li said with a livid face. Dead. Other than the 2 of us, all of our brothers were killed. The 2 Iron Cloak highwaymen trembled in fear as they replied. To the east of Longxi, the Iron Cloak highwaymen were known for their ferocity and fearlessness. But in that short instant, they were truly terrified. 40 mounted bandits and 60 Iron Cloak highwaymen, a group of 100 men, were slaughtered in just a few moments. Broken limbs and corpses piled up like a mountain on the road. On the other hand, there wasn't a single casualty on Wang Chong's side. That kind of ferocity was unimaginable to those who hadn't experienced it themselves. What? As soon as their voices fell, 2 bangs rang out, and they were sent flying almost simultaneously. Retracting his palm, Iron Cloak Li's complexion turned awful. Even though he and the military advisor didn't give chase, they had been paying close attention to the movements in the distance. When the deafening battle cries finally disappeared, Iron Cloak Li had already sensed that something was amiss. But in Iron Cloak Li's view, his brothers were experts in horsemanship. Even if they couldn't defeat the bandits, they should still be able to escape. Perhaps, they might even be able to kill a few of the Tang Dynasty's soldiers. That would be even better. But for more than 100 of his subordinates to be slaughtered, with the exception of 2, this was truly out of Iron Cloak Li's expectations. Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seemed like the other party had intentionally let the 2 of them escape. This made Iron Cloak Li's complexion turn awful. "Zhouan, how are the preparations on your side?" Iron Cloak Li asked grimly as he turned to the military advisor beside him. "I still need a while more. Judging from the alertness of those bandits, I'm afraid that it'll take a little more time." Zhouan replied with an awful complexion as well. Even though the Iron Cloak highwaymen had the advantage in numbers, it was still a considerable loss for them to lose 100 of their subordinates in a single go. The only thing that could make the 2 of them feel better was that those bandits who had just joined them weren't too great of a loss to the Iron Cloak highwaymen. When a new group of bandits appeared, they would be able to replenish their numbers. As for the 60 highwaymen who had died, it was truly a heart-wrenching sight to behold. However, those were the weakest of the Iron Cloak highwaymen, and only a few of them had reached true martial realm. From this point of view, although 100 of their brothers had died, they were all the weakest in the lower ranks, so it wasn't a serious loss. Iron Cloak Li nodded as he clenched his right hand into a fist and spoke with killing intent. "Once you're done with your preparations, I'll make a move personally and slaughter those fellows." Up till now, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had never suffered such heavy losses. Including those whom Wang Chong had killed previously, he had already killed more than 100 of them. Iron Cloak Li had to admit that he had underestimated these 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. In terms of fighting prowess, they were definitely much stronger than those on the slope. However, Wang Chong and the others had also succeeded in infuriating Iron Cloak Li. If Iron Cloak Li was only trying to win over the hearts of his subordinates and intimidate them previously, at this moment, he was bent on killing Wang Chong and the others. "Let's wait for a moment first. We'll wipe out all of the Tang soldiers on the slope together with them." Iron Cloak Li spat. In his eyes, the Tang soldiers on the slope were no different from birds in a cage. The only reason why he didn't slaughter them was because he was afraid that Wang Chong and the others would leave once they had nothing to worry about. Dee-da-da. Just as he was fuming with rage, the sound of galloping could be heard from afar, accompanied by a cloud of dust. Turning around a corner, Wang Chong led the way with Bai Siling on his right. Leading the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, they slowly appeared before everyone's eyes. Boom! When Wang Chong appeared with the 40 cavalrymen, a deafening cheer suddenly sounded from the slope. Zhang Lin, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the other cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty all stood up in agitation. Regardless of the conflicts they had previously, at this moment, Wang Chong's appearance had filled them with unprecedented hope. Unbelievable. He really did it. They really killed more than 100 bandits and highwaymen. Not a single one of them was missing, that the crowd was excited. When more than 100 people went out and only 2 returned, the crowd already knew the result. But who could have thought that not a single one of the 40 cavalrymen would die? Unbelievable. How did that lad do it? Looking at Wang Chong and the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu muttered in astonishment. They were veterans who had fought against the highwaymen and highwaymen. Just like that, more than a dozen veterans of the Tang dynasty were slumbering in this place. But despite dragging more than 100 highwaymen and bandits out, Wang Chong still managed to annihilate all of them while coming out unscathed. This result was simply like a miracle. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu knew that it was impossible for them to achieve such a feat. This was the first time that they were deeply impressed by the strength that Wang Chong had displayed. Lad, report your name. Who in the world are you? A loud voice came from the back of the densely packed bandits and horse bandits. The crowd stirred and parted like a wave, creating a straight path on its own. Behind this path was a massive boulder, and standing on top of it was the leader of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, Iron Cloak Li. That 8-foot-tall figure, even separated by layers of space, still gave people a strong sense of oppression. As soon as Wang Chong appeared, Iron Cloak Li's gaze immediately fell on Wang Chong. Hundreds of gazes were directed at Wang Chong from all directions. Even Zhang Lin, Su Gan, and the others, who were hiding behind a makeshift shelter, were paying close attention to Wang Chong as well. The atmosphere was unprecedentedly grave and somber. Di-da. Wang Chong urged his steed forward. Facing the hundreds of gazes, Wang Chong showed no fear at all. Iron Cloak Highwaymen, you sure are gutsy to dare attack the army of the royal court. Do you know the consequences of making an enemy out of the royal court? Paying no heed to Iron Cloak Li, who was standing on top of the boulder, Wang Chong swept his gaze across the surrounding highwaymen. What a joke! You have already come knocking on our door. Wherever you went, you left no one alive. Who knows how many bandits died in your hands? Are we not allowed to retaliate? Officials can kill bandits, and naturally, bandits can kill officials as well. Iron Cloak Li sneered furiously as an unruly aura emanated from him. The world is bright, and the sun and moon are shining brightly. To think that you bunch of bandits, invading the lands of the Tang dynasty as kings, and sparing the lives of those who have committed crimes. The imperial army suppresses the bandits, pacifies the people. This is a righteous act, it is a reasonable act. Are we supposed to allow you bunch of bandits to wreak havoc in the world? You should know the strength of the royal court. With just 40 of us, we can easily wipe out 100 of you without suffering any injuries. When the true army of the royal court appears, you should know what will happen to you. I advise you to make use of this opportunity to repent and turn over a new leaf. There's still time. Wang Chong's gaze was as sharp as a bolt of lightning. Coupled with the feat he had just accomplished, his gaze exerted immense pressure on everyone. For a moment, the entire area fell silent. Chapter 346. Gongzi sure has a sharp tongue. However, if we were afraid of the laws of the royal court, we wouldn't have become bandits. Since this is our livelihood, it goes without saying that our heads are already hanging by our belts. Do you think that we will fear the imperial army? Besides, we have already killed the imperial army, and this isn't the first time. Do you think that there's a way out? At the back of the formation, the military advisor of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, Zhouan, suddenly spoke up. That young man was simply too imposing. With just a few words, he had managed to lower the morale of his brothers. Zhouan knew that if he didn't stop the other party now, something unexpected might really happen. Speaking of which, Gongzi sure is impressive. Despite your young age, you have such a deep understanding of the means of us highwaymen. On top of that, when we make a move, not even the fowls and dogs are spared. Yet, Gongzi killed more than 100 of them without batting an eyelid. Zhouan is truly impressed. To think that a place like the capital would have a figure like Gongzi, I'm really surprised. It seems like if Gongzi were to rise to the top in the future, we would have to keep our distance from Gongzi. That fellow sure is formidable. With just a glance, Wang Chong could tell that the military advisor of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen had managed to raise the morale of the bandits with just a few words. The eyes that were staring at him were filled with hostility and killing intent. You must be the military advisor of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, Zhouan? Wang Chong stared at the middle-aged scholar next to Iron Cloak Li, his eyes sharp and unfazed by his aura. A light breeze blew by, causing Wang Chong's robe to flutter. Even the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty who had followed Wang Chong for a long time had never seen such a powerful aura before. Just how many secrets does that lad have? Bai Xiling looked at Wang Chong's slender back with a peculiar look in her eyes. She had seen many geniuses in Longwei training camp, and she had seen many scions and scions of prestigious clans. However, none of them could match up to the feeling that Wang Chong gave her. General. Bai Xiling racked her brains and finally found a suitable word. The aura that Wang Chong was exuding now was like that of a general on the battlefield who was in charge of the country. Before him, be it the thousands of horse bandits and bandits on the other side, or the cavalry of the Tang dynasty on his side, all of them were subconsciously suppressed and followed his lead. Even Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others, who were on bad terms with him, were paying close attention to his every move. Even though his cultivation base was lower than many people's. Oblivious to the thoughts of the crowd behind him, Wang Chong's attention was completely focused on the middle-aged advisor standing beside the Iron Cloak highwayman. Your Excellency is also a well-read scholar. Why don't you take the imperial examinations and fight for your fame? Don't tell me that the Book of Confucius and Mencius also teaches people to become bandits, to rob houses and occupy land to become kings. Ha, you don't have to worry about that, young master. I am indebted to the Iron Cloak highwayman for saving my life, and I am willing to serve him. On the other hand, Gongzi, you can't be thinking that you will be able to save your companions just like that, right? By the way, the Iron Cloak highwayman is the only one who has the final say here. Don't waste your energy on me. Zhouan stroked his beard with a smile. Ha ha ha, lad, you do have some capability. Seeing that you have killed more than 100 of my men, I will give you a chance. Put down your weapons and surrender. Perhaps, you might even be able to save your companions. Otherwise, both you and them will die. Iron Cloak Li laughed heartily, and his voice reverberated through the surroundings like the rumbling of thunder. Leader of the bandits, are you joking with me? Won't we die even faster if we put down our weapons? Wang Chong sneered coldly. There's no other way then. If you don't put down your weapons, they will die even faster. Attack! As soon as those words were spoken, Iron Cloak Li's smile retracted, and with a wave of his hand, he pointed at Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others with a cold and cruel expression on his face. Hong Long. The bandits and highwaymen, who were still in a passive state a moment ago, suddenly began to move like a massive machine. 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen moving out at the same time, their aura could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. It was extremely astonishing. Nay! With the highwaymen at the front and highwaymen at the back, they charged right at Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others with the aid of bows and arrows. This is bad. On the slope, the faces of Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others warped in horror. They had just received the pills from Wang Chong and the others, and they hadn't even rested for long when the Iron Cloak highwaymen suddenly launched an all-out attack. Get up! Get up! Damn it! Bastard, what are you doing? Put down your weapons. Are you trying to get us killed? Are you insane? If they put down their weapons, we will die even faster. That on the slope, Wang Yongtu cursed furiously as he tried to get Wang Chong and the others to put down their weapons. However, what greeted him was Zhang Lin and Su Gan's fury. Huang Yongtu might have been speaking without thinking, but Su Gan and Zhang Lin knew that if Wang Chong and the others were to put down their weapons, there would be no hope left. Everyone was going to die. Hurry up and prepare the defenses. Don't let them get close. If we can't hold them, we can break out at any moment. Zhang Lin hurriedly issued the command. The 26 true martial realm cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty were still able to hold on for some time. What should we do? Bai Xiling subconsciously turned to look at Wang Chong. The Iron Cloak highwaymen's sudden assault on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu had thrown the crowd on the main road into chaos. Don't panic. Everyone, listen to my command. Charge! Don't hold back, charge. Wang Chong swiftly analyzed the situation before Siling's astonished gaze, Wang Chong waved his hands grandly and led the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen into the midst of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Kill! Kill! Carrying the momentum of killing 100 bandits and highwaymen, the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen charged into the midst of the Iron Cloak highwaymen like ferocious beasts. The speed of the charge was far faster than the speed of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Before the first wave of bandits could even reach Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, the steeds of Wang Chong and the others had already charged into the midst of the Iron Cloak highwaymen like a sledgehammer. The same sight repeated itself once more. Hong Long. Amidst shrill, panicked, and terrified screams, dozens of mountain bandits and horse bandits were thrown high into the air by the impact of the warhorses' charge as if they were weightless. Pu. A dense formation of spears pierced through the air, and in the blink of an eye, a large group of bandits and highwaymen fell to the ground. The halos connected with one another, and the forest of spears turned into a tidal wave. Before the charging Tang army, the bandits and highwaymen were no match for them at all. Ah! Get out of the way, get out of the way. Those fellows are attacking us. Hold them back. Get out of the way. Let me through. Save me. Wang Chong's assault was extremely sudden, and the speed of his steed's charge was even more unexpected. Most of the bandits clearly saw it, but they were unable to react in time. In just an instant, the bandits and highwaymen collapsed like weeds, their severed limbs flying all over the place. Relying on their superior strength, the bandits and highwaymen on the east side of the main road collapsed in an instant, and the collapse swiftly spread to the rear. The crowd fell into chaos. The valiance and ferocity of the bandits and highwaymen were nothing in the face of the ruthlessness of the imperial army, as well as their machine-like efficiency in harvesting. The bandits and highwaymen screamed as they frantically fled. Panic swiftly spread through the crowd, and it seemed like it was going to spread to the entire army. Bastard! Iron Cloak Li flew into a rage. Before they could make any progress in their assault, Wang Chong's army was already on the verge of crushing the eastern side. Mobilize the archers and aim at the eastern side. Send 100 brothers over to coordinate with the other bandits and exterminate them. Yes. One of the leaders of the Iron Cloak highwaymen quickly carried out the order. Beside the boulder, the military advisor of the Iron Cloak highwaymen couldn't help but smile bitterly. He knew that lad wouldn't be easy to deal with, but only after seeing him for himself did he realize how difficult it was. Under his command, the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen were as ferocious as beasts. The might of their charge even sent some of the bandits and their steeds flying a dozen zhang into the air. This aura was too fearsome. At this rate, if the Iron Cloak highwaymen were to focus on the Tang army on the slope and ignore Wang Chong's group in the east, even if they succeeded, they would suffer heavy losses. We're in trouble. Zhou smiled bitterly. At this moment, he suddenly realized that the Tang army was much more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Left flank to the left and right flank to the right. Ignore the Tang army on the slope for now and don't enter the main road. The Tang army is the strongest on the main road. Flank them from both sides of the slope. Zhou quickly mobilized his troops and issued a series of orders, instructing the bandits and highwaymen to move according to his will. Under Zhou's command, the 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen quickly got into formation. They gave up on the main road and circled around the forest on both sides of the slope, forming a formation that encompassed Wang Chong's group. Zhou's gaze was sharp. In just an instant, he could tell that they weren't a match for Wang Chong's group on the main road. War steeds could charge on flat ground, but on the complicated terrain, their might would be greatly reduced. As long as they could circle around the Iron Cloak highwaymen and attack from both sides of the slope, they would be able to suppress them. Retreat! Seeing that the Iron Cloak highwayman was about to surround Wang Chong's group, Wang Chong raised his left fist and spread open his fingers. In the next instant, the 20 cavalrymen under Wang Chong split into two groups and charged forward, crushing the eastern formation of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen. First, they would cover Bai Siling's retreat before retreating themselves. Seeing that the encirclement was about to be completed, some of the bandits thought that this was an opportunity and charged forward desperately, hoping to delay Wang Chang's group. However, under the charge of Wang Chang's two groups of cavalrymen, they were crushed to smithereens. Nay! With a loud neigh, the Iron Cloak Highwaymen charged out from the main road like a serpent before the encirclement of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen closed in. Chapter 347. In that instant, time seemed to have come to a standstill. The Iron Cloak Highwaymen who were charging toward Wang Chang's group abruptly came to a halt. Even the most ferocious highwaymen couldn't help but shudder in fear when they saw the orderly formation of the Tang Dynasty cavalrymen. If even the strongest highwayman reacted in such a manner, how could the other highwaymen possibly react in such a manner? The main road, the mountain slope, and the forest, as far as the eye could see, everything was deathly silent. The pungent stench of blood permeated the air. In this brief clash, Wang Chang's side was once again unscathed, whereas the Iron Cloak Highwaymen had lost more than 60 corpses. Seeing was believing. Even though they knew that their 100 brothers had died at the hands of Wang Chang's group, and they knew that the imperial army was stronger than the highwaymen, none of that could compare to the shock and awe brought forth by the brief charge of the 40 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen under Wang Chang's command. At this moment, every single cavalryman lined up on the main road seemed like a demon that had just walked out of hell, exerting a terrifying pressure that felt almost tangible. Gulp! One of the highwaymen gulped down a mouthful of saliva. His pale face was filled with fear. The immovable Tang Dynasty cavalrymen were even more frightening and intimidating than when they charged forward. Having traversed the West for so many years, he had never imagined that he would fear a group of 40 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen amidst an army of more than 700 highwaymen. Those fellows are too strong. The same thought flashed across the minds of many others, and some of the highwaymen instinctively retreated from the crowd. After witnessing the might of the charge of the cavalrymen, they no longer believed that they could remain safe in the midst of a crowd. This is great. I didn't expect those fellows to be so formidable. That lad, we've truly underestimated him. No commoner can possess such military accomplishments. Even more so, no commoner can command 40 cavalrymen with such might. I've misjudged him. He's definitely a disciple of one of the most powerful military families in the capital. White-hoofed Shadow, Bai Siling is right. Who is this guy? On the slope, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the remaining Tang Dynasty cavalrymen were also shocked speechless. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that the steel cavalry just now was a cavalry unit just like them. That kind of charging power and combat strength was too shocking. With their own strength, they had actually managed to forcefully disperse the Iron Cloak Highwaymen's attack and nullify their offense. As a result, the 500 to 600 Iron Cloak Highwaymen were forced to shift their focus to defending against Wang Chong, Bai Siling, and the others. This was simply inconceivable. All of this was done under the command of Wang Chong. His calmness, rationality, and decisiveness left an even deeper impression on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu than the charge of 40 cavalrymen. Before this, the two of them had been mocking and making things difficult for Wang Chong, thinking that he was just a lowly commoner from the Kunwa training camp. But at this very moment, how could the two of them dare to harbor such thoughts? No one could command 40 cavalrymen to such an extent, be it Long Wei or Shen Wei, not a single person could do it. This wasn't a feat that any ordinary person could accomplish. At this moment, the two of them had a strong feeling that Wang Chong was definitely a scion of one of the prestigious clans in the capital, and an extremely powerful one at that. However, the two of them had never heard of such a person before. Who in the world is that fellow? Beneath a scarlet maple tree riddled with arrows, Su Gan muttered to himself. At this moment, he was deeply curious about Wang Chong's identity. Bastard! At this moment, no one was more furious than Iron Cloak Li, the leader of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen. Including the highwaymen who had died earlier, Wang Chang's group of 40 had already killed nearly 200 of his highwaymen and highwaymen. This was a heavy blow to him. Even though most of the casualties were highwaymen who had defected to his side, it didn't soothe the rage in Iron Cloak Li's heart. Zhouan? How much longer? Iron Cloak Li gazed into the distance and asked grimly. The rage in his eyes was on the verge of bursting out. A little while more, Zhouan replied grimly. He also felt terrible inside. From a certain perspective, this could be considered as a dereliction of duty on his part. Chief, rest assured. By the time the arrangements are completed, they will have nowhere to run. By then, you can do whatever you want to them. But before that, I'll have to trouble you to wait a little longer. I'll listen to you for a little longer. Iron Cloak Li flung his sleeves and suppressed his anger. He had always trusted the military advisor by his side. But this time, the losses were truly too great. Even if they were to win this battle, it would still damage his prestige. A light breeze blew past, and the surroundings were completely silent. The main road, the hill, and the bend in the east, all three sides were silent. There wasn't even the slightest sound to be heard. Unknowingly, the focus of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen had shifted from Su Gan and Huang Yongtu to Wang Chang's group. Even the true martial realm experts by Iron Cloak Li's side had been dispatched to the left side of the main road. After losing nearly 200 of his subordinates, Iron Cloak Li could no longer tolerate any more losses. And with nearly 80% of the attacks being diverted to Wang Chang's group, the remaining forces were unable to focus on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu's group. Just like that, the three sides fell into a stalemate. Goo. After an unknown period of time, a sudden change occurred. Before countless eyes, a white silhouette suddenly appeared in the sky, and a white pigeon suddenly descended from the sky. In an instant, the atmosphere turned bizarre. Bang! The bowstring vibrated, and before the pigeon could even land, an iron arrow shot through the air. Blood sprayed everywhere as the arrow pierced through the pigeon's body. Following the direction of the steel arrow, the leader of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen was slowly sheathing his bow. It's a carrier pigeon from the royal court. Seeing the golden hoop on the pigeon's right leg, Lieutenant Zhang Lin's expression tensed up. With a flick of his horsewhip, he leaped into the air. Before the pigeon was sent flying by the arrow, he coiled his whip around the pigeon's corpse and pulled it back. The purpose of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen was only to prevent the news from being transmitted. Seeing that the carrier pigeon was dead, they didn't make any other moves. Lieutenant Zhang, how is it? Did the carrier pigeon say anything? Su Gan and Huang Yongtu's faces tensed up as they turned their gazes over. Even Wang Chong and Bai Siling turned their gazes over as well. This was the first time they had received a carrier pigeon from the royal court. Without saying a word, Zhang Lin took down a golden lacquered bamboo tube from the pigeon's leg and carefully took out a paper scroll. He unrolled it and began reading through it. I have received a second-tier mission from the royal court. After reading the contents of the letter, not only was there no joy on Zhang Lin's face, there was even a bitter smile on his lips. Ah! Su Gan and Huang Yongtu were taken aback. To receive a second-tier mission from the royal court at such a time? Lieutenant Zhang, what kind of mission is it? Su Gan propped himself up and walked over. For some reason, he felt that Zhang Lin's expression was a little bizarre. Take a look for yourself. Zhang San did not say much and handed over the letter in his hand. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu took a look at it, and a bizarre expression appeared on their faces. There wasn't much content on the letter, just a few simple sentences. Second-tier mission, Tez has ordered the 80 members of the 6th echelon to eliminate Iron Cloak Li and his accomplices. What kind of joke is this? Huang Yongtu looked furious. He threw the letter in his hand on the ground as if he was venting his anger. Giving us a second-tier mission at such a time? Are you tired of waiting for us to die? Furthermore, look at the bandits and highwaymen outside. There are at least 700 to 800 of them. Do you think that we can deal with them with just the few of us? Not to mention, there's still Iron Cloak Lee. Even Lieutenant Lee isn't a match for him. What kind of darn mission is this? Huang Yongtu, are you insane? Watch your words. Are you trying to hide from the royal court? Su Gan warned grimly. Damn it, I'm already on the verge of death, why would I care about such trifles? Huang Yongtu spat with a twisted expression. No one knew how long they could hold on. Sitting in the small fortification on the hillside, it seemed that they were temporarily safe, but no one knew when they would be smashed into pieces and turned into dust. The feeling of dying at any moment was even more frightening than true death. Lord, calm down. Zhang Lin smiled bitterly. The royal court doesn't know our current situation. They are only concerned with issuing orders, so they have no idea where we are or that we are currently being surrounded by the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Besides, the capital is too far away from here. Even the royal court wouldn't know that the Iron Cloak highwaymen have gathered 600 to 700 bandits. Pang! Huang Yongtu punched a tree beside him, sending wood splinters flying. Even his fingers were bleeding from the impact. Even though Huang Yongtu knew that Zhang Lin was speaking the truth, it didn't make him feel any better. So far, the best news for us is that there are 2 other lords who aren't surrounded yet. On top of that, the other lord seems to be extremely proficient in the art of war, and his grasp of timing is exceptional as well. This is our only hope. As Zhang Lin spoke, he turned to look at Wang Chong and the others. It had been some time since he had received the 80 cavalrymen, but to be honest, the men and steeds hadn't changed at all. The only difference was that the commander had changed, but the disposition and authority of the 40 cavalrymen were vastly different from when he was leading them. Even their fighting prowess was on a completely different level. This was the change brought about by a wise commander. The duty of a warrior was to guard the borders, so Zhang Lin didn't care too much about his own life. At this moment, he was more concerned about the young man before him. With this kind of military training, he would definitely become a great general who could rule over an entire region in the future if he were to be further tempered on the battlefield of the empire. Such a person was of utmost importance to them. Chapter 348. Lieutenant Zhang, what was written on the arrow that Xiling shot over earlier? Su Gan suddenly turned to Zhang Lin and asked. There was a white cloth hanging on the arrow that Bai Xiling had shot over. Other than the pills that had helped them immensely, there were also many words written on the white cloth. However, Zhang Lin didn't mention a single word about the contents of the white cloth. This. Sai, that letter was actually written for me by that lord. I'll show it to you if we manage to escape from here. That lord has instructed me time and time again not to show the letter to anyone other than me. It's written on it how we can escape. That's probably our only way, and also our last chance. Zhang Lin said with a bitter smile. Oh. Even we are not allowed to see it? Su Gan asked. Even though Zhang Lin didn't say it out loud, Su Gan knew that the only person whom Zhang Lin could refer to as that lord was probably Wang Chong. Zhang Lin nodded earnestly. Su Gan fell silent. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something, and he subconsciously turned to look at Huang Yongtu. The only reason why Wang Chong would instruct them time and time again not to show the letter was probably Huang Yongtu. That fellow was probably worried about Huang Yongtu. Bastard! At the same time, Huang Yongtu also came to a realization. Veins popped up on his forehead, and rage burned in his heart. Even though he didn't say a word, he wasn't deaf. He didn't miss a single word that Su Gan and Zhang Lin had said. What does that bastard mean by that? Does he not trust me? Huang Yongtu's face was flushed red from anger. At a time like this, she actually said that she didn't trust him. How could he endure this? Be it Zhang Lin or Su Gan, they wisely turned their heads away, pretending that they hadn't heard Zhang Lin's words at all. Huang Yongtu and Wang Chong had been at loggerheads along the way. It was understandable why Wang Chong wouldn't tell him about it. "Lord, what do we do next?" On the eastern path, Ma Song suddenly asked. His words attracted everyone's attention, and they all looked at Wang Chong, who was at the front of the group. The stalemate had been going on for quite some time now, but this wasn't enough to save Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Furthermore, the bandit leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen hadn't made a move yet. At the very least, he hadn't made a move against them yet. It would be great if we could spread the news. Another 10-man squad leader said. It's useless. The capital is very far from here, and even the nearest garrison is 3 to 4 days away. If we wait until then, it will be too late. Bai Xiling was the one who spoke. She immediately rejected the 10-man squad leader's idea. In other words, we can only rely on ourselves to save them now. Xiling is right. The other party even shot down the pigeon sent by the imperial court as soon as possible. Their goal was to prevent us from spreading the news. They won't let us have that chance. Wang Chong frowned. In order to prevent all kinds of cheating, before the mission was completed, no one was allowed to bring in any kind of communication device. As a result, when Wang Chong and the others were in danger, they were unable to communicate with the outside world at all. Moreover, the road to the west had always been the most remote, desolate, and unfrequented mountain range. Apart from the occasional traveling merchant, there were even fewer people who came here. If not for the fact that it was far away from the royal court, there wouldn't have been so many bandits and highwaymen in the first place. In other words, the only hope they had to save Su Gan and the others was the 42 of them. Furthermore, that isn't what I'm most concerned about. There's something else that I'm more worried about. Wang Chong said with a deep voice. What is it? Those words made everyone's heart tighten, and they turned to look at Wang Chong. Do you feel anything? Bai Xiling asked uneasily. At this moment, Wang Chong was the anchor of the entire army. If even he was feeling uneasy, the others would be even more so. Before today, Bai Xiling would have never imagined that she, along with 40 veteran cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others, would place their hopes on a young man much younger than them. But everything had happened just like that. Regardless of whether it was her or the others, no one felt that anything was amiss. Xiling, why do you think Iron Cloak Li isn't making a move? Wang Chong suddenly asked. Ah! Bai Xiling was taken aback. For a moment, she found herself unable to keep up with Wang Chong's thoughts. Given the current situation, we might not be able to save Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others, but Iron Cloak Li and the others won't be able to deal with us either. The reason why we aren't in a hurry is because we can at least pin down the bulk of their strength and protect Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. But why isn't Iron Cloak Li in a hurry? Given their strength, they could have easily devoured Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Even though they would have to pay a price, it's still within their means. But they chose not to do so. That's because they want to use Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others to pin us down. If Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others were to die, we would have retreated immediately. But now that we are here, why isn't he making a move? With his back facing Bai Xiling, Wang Chong's gaze pierced through space to look at the bandit chief and the military advisor on the boulder behind the bandits and highwaymen. To be able to control so many bandits and highwaymen and make them work for him, there was no doubt about Iron Cloak Li's capability. Furthermore, to be able to mobilize the bandits and highwaymen who had relied on him so effectively when he had just charged in and crushed their front lines, the military advisor was able to react in a timely and effective manner. On top of that, he was able to see through the fact that the cavalrymen were unable to traverse through the mountain slope and mobilize the bandits and highwaymen to flank him from both sides to counter his cavalrymen. Facing such an opponent, Wang Chong couldn't afford to underestimate them. If he were to underestimate them, it would only lead to his own defeat and an unacceptable outcome. You mean? Hearing Wang Chang's words, Bai Xiling also frowned. She seemed to have thought of something as well. Tell me, let's see if we share the same thoughts. Wang Chong said grimly. A storm seemed to be brewing between his brows. The reason why they aren't making a move yet is because they are waiting for an opportunity to crush us completely. Bai Xiling probed. Wang Chong nodded solemnly. That's what I'm thinking as well. Those Iron Cloak highwaymen are too calm, to the point that it's ridiculous. If I'm not mistaken, the military advisor of the Iron Cloak highwaymen must have made some arrangements behind our backs. Then what should we do? Bai Xiling's face warped in astonishment, and she found it hard to maintain her composure. 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen were already difficult to deal with. If they had some sort of trump card up their sleeves, they would be in deep trouble. Perhaps, not only would they be unable to save Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others, they might even lose their lives. It's too late. If I'm not mistaken, they should be nearing the end of their preparations. It's too late for us to retreat now. Wang Chong said grimly. Around them, the sound of the wind surged. The entire army was deathly silent. The atmosphere was extremely stifling. This was the first time a regular army of the Tang dynasty had been forced into such a state by bandits and highwaymen. But the predicament they were in was right before them. No matter how formidable the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen were, it would be difficult for them to deal with 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen. Not to mention, there were quite a few true martial realm highwaymen among them. The difference in numbers was simply too great. Furthermore, according to Li Tsangqi's words, Iron Cloak Li was at least a true martial realm 5 Dan expert. Coupled with his unique Iron Cloak technique, if they were to wait for him to make a move, the situation would be even more perilous. Seated on the back of the white-hoofed shadow, countless thoughts flashed across Wang Chang's mind. Bai Xiling knew that Zhang Xian was deep in thought. Even though she was anxious, she knew that she shouldn't disturb him, so she could only forcefully suppress her emotions. Time slowly passed, and after an unknown period of time, Bai Xiling finally couldn't take it anymore. Have you thought of something? There's only one way out of this predicament, and it's also the last and only way. What is it? Bai Xiling asked. Wang Chong chuckled silently. His gaze swept across the space before him, landing on the Iron Cloak highwayman chief and the military advisor. But before that, we still have some other matters to attend to. Wang Chong waved his hands, and the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen immediately retreated around the corner. What are they trying to do? As soon as Wang Chong left, Iron Cloak Li immediately frowned. Could it be possible that they have discovered our plan? Iron Cloak Li had traversed the mountains unhindered, and regardless of whether it was merchants or soldiers, he would kill as he pleased without any qualms. But this time, Iron Cloak Li felt as though he was being held back. The reason was simple. This group of 40 soldiers was too threatening to him. That shouldn't be possible. I've already instructed them to circle around the mountain ridge. Even a bird wouldn't be alarmed by their presence. It's impossible for them to sense anything from the surroundings. Furthermore, since they are already here, even if they were to sense something, they wouldn't be able to leave so easily. My intuition is that they have only left temporarily, and they aren't too far away either. Zhouan said after a moment of contemplation. Men, send a scout out to take a look. Iron Cloak Li pondered for a moment before waving his hands. Yes, Lord. A highwayman scout quickly acknowledged the order and left. Damn it, could it be that these fellows sensed danger and abandoned us to escape? On the slope, as soon as Wang Chong and Bai Xiling made a move, Wang Yongtu couldn't help but curse anxiously. He wasn't someone who would lose his composure in the first place. But his life was at stake, and every single action of Wang Chong and the others concerned his life. Thus, Wang Yongtu couldn't help but be alarmed. Huang Yongtu had never experienced such a dangerous situation since he was born in a large clan and had an illustrious status. Had he known that he would be in such a predicament, he would have never participated in this expedition. Chapter 349. Don't worry, if that lord wanted to escape, he wouldn't have come here in the first place. Besides, if he wanted to leave, he would have already left. A voice came from the side. It was Zhang San comforting her. Huang Yongtu felt a little better. Hiya. At the same time, the clopping of hooves could be heard. Turning around, Huang Yongtu saw an iron-cloak highwayman with a valiant aura galloping off in the direction where Wang Chong and the others had retreated. Bang! Almost at the same time, a bowstring vibrated, and a massive metal arrow shot out from the corner of the main road. With just a single arrow, it pierced through the head of the iron-cloak highwayman. The immense force of the arrow pierced through his forehead and out through the back of his head. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, and the highwayman was sent flying from his steed. The arrow pierced into the trunk of a large tree on the slope behind. Ah! Exclamations of shock and gasps could be heard from the crowd. Everyone was stunned by the arrow. No one could have imagined that Wang Chong and the others would stay behind while retreating. That arrow was incomparably swift. Be it in terms of speed, strength, or timing, it left no room for anyone to dodge at all. That iron-cloak highwayman scout didn't even have time to react before the arrow pierced through his head. You've really guessed it. You've succeeded. At the same time, about 50 zhang away from the corner, Bai Siling slowly sheathed her bow and turned around with a confident smile. Then, she made a V gesture to Wang Chong. Well done. Wang Chong chuckled. Bai Siling didn't specialize in archery, but her archery skills were already astounding. She was the one with the highest attainment in archery among the group, and her arrows had never missed their target. Let's go. With this arrow, they should at least be a little wary. They won't be able to scout as freely as they like. Besides, if we can eliminate one of them, we should at least try our best to whittle down their strength. Wang Chong said. There were simply too many iron-cloak highwaymen, and it was impossible to defeat them head-on. Thus, Wang Chong could only think of a way to whittle away at their strength like water droplets grinding a stone. Wang Chong waved his hand, and the 40 cavalrymen continued to gallop out. Bastard! On the boulder, Iron-Cloak Li's complexion turned awful upon seeing the scout he had sent out being pierced through the head by an arrow. Again. Waving his hands grandly, Iron-Cloak Li sent another subordinate over. Gallop, gallop! The second Iron-Cloak highwayman was much more cautious than before. Moving as one with his steed, he circled around the corner. Barely after he had galloped for a short distance, pang! The bowstring vibrated, and another arrow pierced through his skull. But this time, the iron arrow was shot from the forest. Second one. Bai Siling slung her bow and arrows on her back, mounted her horse, and with a squeeze of her legs, she immediately leapt out of the forest. When Wang Chong retreated earlier, only the 40 cavalrymen had followed him. However, Bai Siling didn't leave. Instead, she had hidden herself behind the forest. That highwayman was so focused on chasing after her that he didn't expect Bai Siling to be hiding behind the forest. Caught off guard, he fell for the arrow once more. Damn it! Hearing that the galloping of the steed had stopped after turning the corner, Iron-Cloak Li knew that the second scout must have been killed as well. Again. With a livid face, Iron-Cloak Li waved his hand and sent out another scout. But this time around, he was much smarter. He sent out 3 scouts, and they carefully circled around the corner before heading to the main road and 2 hills to the left and right. This way, they could avoid being ambushed by the other party. But this time, they were welcomed by 4 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, as well as by Siling herself. As intense as the battle was, it ended swiftly as well. 3 highwaymen scouts faced off against 5 true martial realm experts, and it didn't take long for them to lose their lives. This was truly an awkward situation. Due to Wang Chang's retreat, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had lost 6 of their brothers before they could gather any intelligence. Furthermore, they weren't mere subordinates but Iron Cloak Li's true subordinates. A deathly silence fell over the massive boulder. "Advisor, what do you think?" Iron Cloak Li finally turned to Zhou and asked. This advisor of the Iron Cloak highwayman was similarly silent. The young man from the training camp was simply too crafty. His every move was completely out of the ordinary. Even if it was Zhou himself, he wasn't confident that he would be able to escape unscathed under the other party's schemes. But it just so happened that they couldn't just leave the other party alone. Otherwise, there would be no order to their attack or retreat. If Wang Chong hadn't gone far and launched a surprise attack, they would truly be in deep trouble. After all, warhorses could wrap cloth around their hooves to reduce the sound of their hooves. "Chief, I don't think that there's a need to increase our manpower. If the other party returns and hides behind the corner, unless we send at least 200 men, we'll just be sending ourselves to our deaths. If that's the case, it's better to send someone who's more agile and skilled. If you're worried about the other party's archery, we can find a way to equip them with a metal shield," Zhou said after a moment of contemplation. Naturally, they didn't have the standard shields and tower shields that were commonly used in the military. However, it shouldn't be a problem for them to craft a simple shield with a few pieces of metal. Zhou's orders were swiftly relayed down. After losing 3 of their skilled brothers, Iron Cloak Li and Zhou finally received the news that they wanted to hear. Reporting to Chief, they haven't gone far. They are resting at an area 300 zhang away. Got it. We'll look into it after an incense's time. Yes. Chief. The highwayman's scout quickly retreated. After the scout left, Iron Cloak Li turned to Zhou with a frown on his forehead. "I don't know what they're up to either. But of course, we can't rule out the possibility that they're just trying to fool us." Knowing what Iron Cloak Li was thinking, Zhou shook his head. It was rare for him to encounter such an elusive opponent that he could not fathom or see through. If not for the fact that the other party was a student of the training camp, it would have been impossible for him to become a bandit and call them brothers. He really wanted to convince the chief to recruit that young man. But regardless of what they're up to, it's sufficient as long as they don't leave. In the end, not a single one of them will be able to leave. Zhou stroked his beard confidently as a scheming glint flashed across his eyes. Time is of the essence, and we don't have much time left. The next few hours will determine the fate of us, Su Gan, Wang Yongtu, and the others. Therefore, I hope that from now on, everyone will listen carefully to every order that I say. At the same time, 300 zhang away from the corner, Wang Chong was gathering 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty for a final speech. It was rare for Wang Chong to have such a serious expression on his face. Most of the time, he had a calm and wise expression on his face. As such, many of the cavalrymen could sense the heavy atmosphere, and they couldn't help but put on a solemn expression. "Ma Song, lead your men and form an orderly formation at the front to confuse them. The rest of you, listen to my orders," Wang Chong said grimly. "Yes, Lord." The cavalrymen replied loudly. Of the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, Ma Song and the other 20 had already received Wang Chang's training. Only the 20 cavalrymen under Bai Siling had yet to undergo Wang Chang's training. Following which, Wang Chong divided the cavalrymen under Bai Siling into 4 echelons as well, and he chose a 10-man commander and a 5-man commander as well. Time was of the essence, so Wang Chong instructed the 20 cavalrymen to undergo intense training on the main road. A battle could break out at any moment, and Wang Chong didn't have the luxury of time. Fortunately, these cavalrymen had followed Wang Chong through many joint operations, and on top of that, they had fought with the Iron Cloak highwaymen before, so they were able to familiarize themselves with Wang Chong's commands quickly. Roughly an hour later, the 20 cavalrymen in the 4 groups had already met Wang Chong's requirements. What comes next is the most important thing that all of you have heard. This concerns whether we will be annihilated or successfully exterminate these audacious highwaymen and uphold the dignity of the army and the royal court. I believe that none of you wish to die under the steeds of the highwaymen. After the training was completed, Wang Chong gathered all 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. This is a small formation. This is the crux of the matter, so you must listen carefully. We only have the time of an incense stick. At the start, Bai Siling could still roughly understand what Wang Chong was saying. He knew that he was reorganizing the cavalrymen into more efficient units. However, what Wang Chong did afterwards was something that Bai Siling couldn't understand at all. Many of Wang Chong's orders and instructions were things that Bai Siling had never seen before, needless to say, come into contact with. Bai Siling believed that even those from prestigious military families wouldn't be able to comprehend this. Many of the things that Wang Chong had done were beyond Bai Siling's imagination. Due to her family background, Bai Siling had come into contact with many generals in the army, but none of them had ever displayed such abilities. Who in the world is this fellow? Bai Siling was getting more and more curious about Wang Chong's identity. Many of the things that he had done weren't things that ordinary people could understand. However, Bai Siling knew that time was of the essence, and this wasn't the time to ask such questions. Thus, she forcefully suppressed the impulse in her heart. But deep in her heart, Bai Siling had made up her mind that once this operation was over and she could live a successful life, she would dig out Wang Chong's secrets no matter what, even if she had to be a scoundrel. The sky quickly darkened. Smoke began to rise from the official road as Wang Chong's 40 cavalrymen began to dig a stove to cook. The others were on guard on the official road. The appetite of the 40 people was not small, so the green smoke from the fire was very big. It filled the entire public road, blurring everyone's figures. Chapter 350. Looks like we came at the right time. A Turkic man with a thick beard peeked out from behind the bushes, and the corners of his lips curled up into a sinister smile that left one's hair standing on end. They still have a fire to cook. It looks like they aren't prepared at all. Another man with thick arms and bulging muscles also popped his head out from behind the bushes and brambles. He had a squarish face, but he was a pure Han. Indeed. How could the military advisor's strategy possibly be wrong? The military advisor told us to circle to the rear and lure them over when they attack the soldiers from the front. After which, we'll launch a pincer attack from the front and the back, cutting off their path of retreat and annihilating them. However, I suddenly have a better idea. The bearded Turk looked down at the roiling smoke and gave a savage chuckle, a cruel and callous expression on his face. Perhaps, we can catch them off guard while they are cooking and ambush them. No matter how formidable they are, they won't expect us to descend from the sky. As long as we can kill half of their men in an instant, the rest won't pose a threat. Hu Lang, are you out of your mind? The muscular man beside him was shocked to hear those words. He widened his eyes and stared at Hu Lang. Are you intending to change the military advisor's plan? Chang Dao, you haven't been to the north, so you don't know how fearsome the wolves are. When they hunt, they will hide in the bushes, boulders, and bushes to slowly approach their prey. Then, when their prey is caught off guard, they will suddenly pounce out from their backs and launch a vicious attack. It's rare for prey to escape from such an attack. There are only 40 of them, and at least half of them have put down their weapons and gotten off their steeds. This is the moment when they are least prepared, so there's no better opportunity to attack them. On the grasslands, if our Turkic army were to encounter such an opportunity, they would definitely not let it slip by. The military advisor isn't aware of what we are seeing at the moment, but if he knew, he would surely agree to our plan. Hu Lang sneered savagely. He licked his lips, and his crimson tongue curled up to the tip of his nose. The muscular man with thick arms had a gloomy expression on his face. At the very least, we should inform the military advisor and ask for his opinion before making a decision, right? After struggling for a long time, the muscular man finally spoke. He respected the military counselor very much. Almost instinctively, he did not want to ruin the military counselor's plan. The military advisor is a Han, so I can understand why you agree with him. In fact, I have a lot of respect for the military advisor. He is a man of wisdom. However, you have to think this through. These soldiers will only need the time it takes for a few incense sticks to burn to cook. Send a message from here. The terrain is complex and difficult to traverse. You need to make a big detour. Going back and forth, they had already missed the timing. Unless you run straight from here and tell the counselor. But if we do that, we will definitely be discovered by the soldiers on the hillside. As long as they call out, they'll be prepared, and our efforts will be in vain. At that time, our whereabouts will be exposed, and it will be even easier for these people to escape. Hu Lang said. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a beastly glint gleamed in them. The Turks on the grassland weren't as cultured as the Han, and they weren't as meticulous in their thinking. But the Turks weren't fools, especially when it came to war. In fact, Hu Lang was one of the few Turks who possessed exceptional intelligence in war. Even the bandit leader Iron Cloak Li had nothing but praise for him. If it weren't for the fact that he was favored and valued, he wouldn't have been chosen as the leader of this mission, leading his brothers to carry out the mission of outflanking the rear. In fact, in the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, other than Iron Cloak Li and Zhouan, he was undoubtedly the third in command. Regardless of whether it was his valiance, bravery, or his ability to grasp opportunities, he was highly respected by his brothers. Chang Dao, you have two choices at the moment. The first is for us to circle to their rear and cut off their escape route. Just as the military advisor said, we'll wait for an opportunity to surround them and cut off their escape route. This way, we'll be safe, but we won't be able to launch a surprise attack. By then, they'll already be fighting with our brothers, and our role will only be to surround them. By then, all of the soldiers will be dead. But our brothers will also suffer heavy losses. For the military advisor to instruct us to circle around their rear and take such a huge detour, it's a testament to their fighting prowess. The second choice is for us to launch an attack right now. You can send a signal to the military advisor and have him attack together with us. On top of that, in order to prevent the other scattered soldiers from escaping, I'll send a group of 30 soldiers to the rear. I can specially select a team of 30 people to go around to the back and guard the official road, cutting off their escape route. As soon as any soldiers appear, we'll immediately shoot them down. This is the safest choice we have at the moment. This way, we'll suffer the least casualties. They'll suffer the greatest blow. However, we'll defy the military advisor's orders. Chang Dao, make your choice. Hu Lang turned to the burly man beside him. Regardless of whether they were to fight or not, they had to be on the same page before any operation could be carried out. This was the rule of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen. The burly man didn't say a word, but a myriad of emotions flickered across his face. The military advisor's orders and the golden opportunity before him flashed through his mind. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made his decision. Let's do as you say. Even though he was defying the military advisor's orders, there was one thing that Hu Lang wasn't wrong about. The soldiers were indeed at their weakest at the moment. Attacking them at this time, from a high vantage point, and with the warhorses at their best speed, was indeed the way to pay the smallest price. Chang Dao, congratulations on making the wisest decision. Hu Lang chuckled, as though he had expected Chang Dao to make such a decision. Pulling on the reins, Hu Lang turned around and retreated to the back of the thorny bush. Brothers, prepare yourselves. Behind the dense thistles and thorns were numerous stallions, and mounted on the backs of these stallions were highwaymen. Each and every one of them had a ferocious expression on their faces and powerful auras, and the veins on their temples were bulging out. Beneath their steeds were rings of true martial realm halos. Kill! A moment later, the earth trembled, the forest howled, and the horses galloped. 70 to 80 true martial realm highwaymen leaped down from the peak of the mountain like ferocious tigers. The steep slope maximized the speed of the steeds. In just a short 20 to 30 zhang, the steeds were able to reach an astonishing speed. Hong long long, a cloud of dust billowed, and the ground trembled under the hooves of the steeds. 50 zhang, 70 zhang, in just an instant, the highwaymen had already covered more than half of the distance, and their speed was still increasing. At the same time, the Tang dynasty soldiers at the foot of the mountain couldn't even react in time. Brothers, kill them all. The military advisor said that they still have several million taels of gold on them. Don't let them escape. Kill them. A cloud of dust, mixed with fallen leaves and grass, soared into the clouds. The highwaymen howled and shrieked in excitement at the prospect of an intense battle. Wang Chong was able to use his steed to charge forward and forward on the main road, maximizing the might of the Tang dynasty's cavalry to its limits, and the highwaymen were able to do the same as well. When the highwaymen, whose speed was stacked to the maximum, charged down, even if there was a boulder in front of them, they would still be able to smash it apart, needless to say, the bodies of flesh and blood at the bottom of the mountain. From the very start of the battle, the highwaymen were already standing on the side of victory. Reporting, we've discovered that those bandits are cooking on the main road. At the same time, far away behind the highwaymen and highwaymen, a burly highwayman scout walked through the crowd and reported to the military advisor, Zhouan, reporting. Lord Hu Lang and Lord Chang Dao have sent word that they've discovered that the enemy is cooking on the fire, and they are preparing to launch a surprise attack to defeat them. We hope that the military advisor can cooperate with us. At this moment, the other highwayman leaped down from his steed and appeared before Iron Cloak Li and Zhouan. The two reports arrived almost at the same time, one after the other. What? Upon hearing the news, Zhouan's face immediately warped in horror. This wasn't the order that he had relayed. However, before he could react, he heard an earth-shattering battle cry. The sound was so deafening that it could be heard even from far away. For a moment, Zhouan was dumbfounded. Too fast. Everything had happened too quickly. And it wasn't in his plans at all. Zhouan, what should we do next? Iron Cloak Li was also taken aback. He had heard of the military advisor's plans, but the sight before him was clearly different from what the military advisor had told him. Hu Lang and Chang Dao had clearly disrupted his tempo. But Hu Lang and Chang Dao were his old subordinates, and he believed that they had their own reasons for doing so. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment, and Zhouan's mind was in turmoil. Without a doubt, a variable had appeared. The enemy was cooking on the fire. It was precisely because Hu Lang and Chang Dao noticed this that they changed their plans. Even Zhouan couldn't blame them for launching a surprise attack while the enemy was cooking on the fire. Let me ask you, when you were scouting ahead, did you smell the scent of food? Zhouan suddenly asked. Ah. The highwayman scout was taken aback. He didn't expect the military advisor to ask such a question. I didn't get too close, so I didn't smell anything. This is bad. That lad is too cunning. Hu Lang and the others have fallen for his trap. Hearing those words, Zhouan's face turned ashen. Chief, we need to hurry up and lead our men to attack them, or else it'll be too late. The rest of you, surround the soldiers on the slope. Whether we can help Hu Lang and the others or not will depend on this. Zhouan said anxiously. What? Chapter 351. Iron Cloak Li had never doubted Zhouan's words. More importantly, they were all elites under his command, and most of them were true martial realm experts. It wasn't easy to gather such experts. Jaya. Without any hesitation, Iron Cloak Li leaped up from the boulder and landed on the back of his crimson Fergana steed. Squeezing his legs together, Iron Cloak Li crossed a distance of 7 to 8 zhang and charged out of the encirclement. Fire Slave and Poison Wirm, bring your men and follow me. The rest of you, attack the soldiers on the slope. His voice boomed like a peal of thunder, leaving Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others dumbfounded. No one knew what was going on, but they knew that something big must have happened among the Iron Cloak highwaymen. What happened? Huang Yongtu asked in panic. He wasn't deaf. How could a deaf person not hear the loud voice of the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen? Don't bother too much about it. They are about to launch an attack. Everyone, be careful. Zhang Lin exclaimed in alarm. The disparity in numbers was simply too great, and there was a limit to what they could do. Wang! All over the mountains and plains, the bandits that were as vast as the sea, became restless again. On the slope, the 26 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty swiftly got into formation. After so many intense battles, they had come up with an effective strategy to deal with the highwaymen. Even if they couldn't defeat the highwaymen in the end, they would surely be able to make them pay a heavy price. On the other side, Iron Cloak Li waved his hands grandly and mobilized his most elite troops to charge toward the main road. Zhou An's senses were sharp, and Iron Cloak Li's movements weren't slow either. However, in this chaotic battle that was less than a few hundred feet away from each other, where they schemed against each other and were precise down to the millisecond, the victor was not them. Just as Iron Cloak Li reached the corner of the main road, he suddenly heard a deafening roar. Kill! The deafening roar came from the forest to the right of the main road, and in an instant, a powerful gust of wind blew, causing the trees in the mountain range to tremble. Hung long long. The earth trembled. Countless birds were startled and soared into the sky from the forest. At that moment, everyone clearly felt as if thousands of steel torrents were pouring down from the right side of the mountain peak, sweeping towards them. Not good. Hearing the commotion, Iron Cloak Li's face warped in horror. He immediately slapped the rear of his steed and galloped toward the center of the commotion. The troops led by Hu Lang and Saber had already dived down from the mountain. There was no doubt that the second wave of troops would not be them. Since it wasn't them, there was no doubt that it could only be the Tang dynasty's official army led by that young boy in the training camp. At this moment, Iron Cloak Li's heart was burning with anxiety. Iron Cloak Li could only hope that Hu Lang, Chang Dao, and the others would be able to hold on for a little longer. However, Iron Cloak Li's hopes were just wishful thinking. Not good. We've been tricked. On the main road, the warhorse galloped through the thin layer of green smoke at lightning speed, and with a single slash, it sliced the great Tang cavalrymen standing on the main road into two. Almost immediately, Hu Lang realized that he had fallen into a trap. Those indistinct figures shrouded in green smoke weren't the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, but his brothers who had been killed by the official army. Wooden spears pierced through the bodies of the steeds, stacking them together with the corpses of the highwaymen on top of them firmly on the main road. The green smoke that pervaded the air wasn't fireworks for cooking, but firewood that was purely used to deceive them and lure them. The official army had used the smoke to create an illusion that they were cooking, thus attracting their attacks. Not good. Retreat. Retreat. At this moment, Hu Lang's heart turned cold. He didn't expect the official army to be so cunning. He thought that it was a surprise attack, but it turned out to be a trap. Hung long long. Kill. Hu Lang wanted to stop the bandits, but it was already too late. One after another, the highwaymen charged into the green smoke and sliced the official army in two. The highwaymen, who had been yearning for battle and slaughter, couldn't hear Hu Lang's voice at all. But as soon as they landed on the main road, the speed that they had built up from the mountain peak was reduced to nothing. At this moment, they had lost all of their advantages. In fact, in order to prevent the official army from escaping, Hu Lang even sent 20 to 30 men to the back of the main road, placing himself at a disadvantage. Hung long long. Just as Hu Lang was feeling extremely anxious, he heard a loud rumble. A huge iron spear wrapped in destructive power pierced towards him from the right side of the smoke with the speed of lightning. The speed of that spear was simply too fast. Almost at the same time that Hu Lang saw it, it had already arrived in front of him. It was only a few feet away. Ha! At this crucial moment, Hu Lang bellowed. His stellar energy burst forth, and a green halo of thorns appeared in his body. It spun rapidly, producing a metallic clatter. Boom! With just a single strike, Hu Lang had managed to send the great Tang cavalryman and his steed flying with his overwhelming strength. Even so, the webbing between his thumb and forefinger still trembled violently, and his wrist went numb. In terms of pure strength, the Tang dynasty cavalryman wasn't a match for him at all. However, when a Tang dynasty cavalryman and steed charged down from the top of the mountain, their speed could no longer be measured in terms of pure strength. This is bad. Even though Hu Lang had managed to send a Tang dynasty cavalryman flying with a single strike, he didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, his heart sank. This was because the second spear was already flying toward him at lightning speed. The speed of the spear was so fast that it left a long white trail behind it. Turks, pay with your life. Amidst the thin mist, a Tang dynasty cavalryman and steed leaped down from the top of the mountain. His eyes were sharp as lightning. Even Hu Lang was secretly shocked by the power of that attack. They were both riding horses, but the horsemanship of the Tang dynasty cavalryman was completely different from that of the highwayman. Boom! Hu Lang raised his fist and punched out. His stellar energy condensed into a green wolf's head, and he barely managed to knock the second Tang dynasty cavalryman off course. But soon, the third and fourth spear arrived at the same time. Behind each spear was a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty who had pushed his speed and strength to the limit. This time, Hu Lang wasn't able to dodge anymore. The combined strength of his steed left him wide open. Pu. Two spears pierced into his chest from the left and right. By the time the black spears came out from his back, they were already stained with blood. The last thing Hu Lang saw was a streak of sword light circling in the air and descending from above. I'll be taking this head. The cold voice of a lady sounded in his ears. Hu Lang's vision went dark, and he lost consciousness. Pang! The head fell to the ground. Bai Xiling stood behind Hu Lang, her figure graceful and elegant. Her sword was still extended in her right hand. Naturally, the one who cut off Hu Lang's head was Bai Xiling. Bai Xiling had long seen that Hu Lang was able to send a Tang dynasty cavalryman flying with a single punch. Without a doubt, he was the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. After all, Bai Xiling was much stronger than the other cavalrymen. For cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty and Bai Xiling had charged down from the peak of the mountain. Even Hu Lang could barely stand against such a formation. Xiling, hurry up and get back on the horse. Don't engage in melee combat on the ground. Wang Chang's stern voice came from the back of the horse as a figure passed him like the wind. He didn't use his iron spear either. Instead, he flicked his 10 fingers, and streams of extremely condensed and dense sword qi crisscrossed in the air. Wang Chang's cultivation hadn't even reached true martial realm yet. However, Wang Chong didn't rely on his martial realm to kill his enemies. Instead, he relied on his vast martial arts skills and experience. In terms of martial arts skills and experience, no one here could match up to him. On the other hand, Wang Chong made full use of the thin green mist in the surroundings. His elusive sword qi of massacre complemented the green mist, and every time, there would be a highwayman who was caught off guard. His sword qi would pierce through their bodies and cause them to fall from their steeds. In a battle between cavalrymen, falling from their steeds meant death. Got it. Bai Xiling stuck out her tongue. Even though she was older than Wang Chong, old enough to be his elder sister, she couldn't help but act like a little girl in front of Wang Chong. Bai Xiling was filled with admiration for Wang Chong for this ambush. The Iron Cloak highwayman had actually prepared a backup plan. If not for Wang Chong's sharp wits, they might have really been wiped out. But Wang Chong's ingenious chimney smoke not only managed to lure out the highwaymen, he even managed to catch them off guard. Those who wanted to ambush them ended up being ambushed instead. The Iron Cloak highwayman had suffered heavy losses this time around. Nay. Bai Siling grabbed the saddle and easily got onto the back of her steed. This was something she had learned from the other cavalrymen. Hiya! Bai Siling squeezed her steed's abdomen and charged into the fray with her sword in hand. Boom! 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 Rings of light clashed with one another, producing a metallic clang. The air around them exploded, and shockwaves spread several zhang away. The neighing of Nei's steed, the cries of agony, and the sounds of collisions echoed in the air. The Iron Cloak highwaymen on the main road outnumbered Wang Chang's, but the moment they stopped on the main road, it meant that they had already lost the battle. Against the Tang dynasty cavalrymen charging down from the top of the mountain, not a single highwayman was able to stop them. In just the first wave, Wang Chong and the others had managed to kill more than 30 true martial realm highwaymen and scatter them in one fell swoop. Chapter 352. Hung Long Long. Dust billowed into the air as the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen charged forward. In just a few rounds, they had already torn apart the true martial realm highwaymen, leaving the ground littered with corpses. The charge of a cavalry did not advocate individual combat. Instead, it relied on the strength of a group to bring out its full potential. As such, as long as the highwaymen were in a straight line, they would not be facing a single Tang dynasty cavalryman, but an endless horde of cavalrymen. The strength of an individual was insignificant before the might of a group. Retreat! Retreat! Changdao's voice sounded incomparably despairing amidst the smoke and dust. He was slightly luckier than Hu Lang, having managed to dodge the first wave of the cavalry charge. But after witnessing the might of the charge of 40 cavalrymen, Changdao realized that he had underestimated the situation. The highwaymen were no match for the well-trained cavalrymen of the imperial army. When the 40 cavalrymen charged down from the peak of the mountain like a torrent of steel, even Changdao felt his heart tremble in fear, not daring to face them head-on. Even he wouldn't be able to last more than a few blows from such a torrent of steel. We can't hold them off anymore. Brothers, hurry up and retreat. Changdao's heart was filled with anxiety, and his forehead was drenched in sweat. However, Changdao's thoughts were still too naive. After a few attempts, all of the true martial realm Iron Cloak highwaymen had already begun fleeing for their lives without his orders. Some of them charged in the direction of the bandits around the corner, some to the east of the main road, and some to the left and right of the mountain. In any case, they were like headless flies, fleeing for their lives in a panic. The might of a cavalry charge was simply too great. There was no stalemate or intense battle at all. 4 to 5 cavalrymen maintained their formation and charged forward, killing one highwayman after another in an instant. 80 elites of the Iron Cloak highwaymen collapsed in an instant. This was the true meaning of a crushing defeat. Brat! I'll kill you! Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering boom came from afar like a clap of thunder. The tremendous power contained in the sound even caused the thick smoke and dust to explode. The entire mountain forest trembled under this thunderous roar that was filled with anger. In the blink of an eye, Wang Chong turned his head around and saw a burly man over 8 feet tall riding a Fergana horse 2,000 feet away. He was riding on a Fergana horse, leaving a long trail of white air behind him as if he had gone mad. On the hooves of the Fergana horse beneath him, 5 true martial realm halos of the same color and ring vibrated rapidly, emitting a metallic sound. Everywhere they passed, the gravel and grass were all shattered into pieces. That aura was unstoppable and invincible. Even a few hundred meters away, that astonishing aura could be felt. What should we do? Have they rushed over? So fast. Bai Siling turned to look at Wang Chong. In their plans, the Iron Cloak highwaymen would surely rush over to reinforce them, but it was impossible for them to arrive so quickly, not to mention that their leader, Iron Cloak Li, had appeared. Not only so, something has happened on the other side of the road as well. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu are also under attack. Listen. Ma Song also reined in his steed. He hadn't paid much attention to it during the battle, but now that he was paying close attention, he could hear the deafening battle cries coming from the other side of the road. Without a doubt, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had also launched an attack on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu while they were ambushing them. The other party had reacted swiftly, and the situation was starting to turn disadvantageous for them. Iron Cloak Li was swiftly approaching. Standing on the official road, Wang Chang's long hair fluttered in the wind as his heart pounded furiously. Zhouan. This was the only person Wang Chong could think of. To be able to come up with such a plan that allowed Iron Cloak Li to rush over so quickly and launch an attack immediately, Wang Chong could only think of the military advisor of the Iron Cloak highwayman, Zhouan. Thus, the slightest error could lead to a huge error. Execute the second plan, Wang Chong said without any hesitation. But what about Su Gan and Huang Yongtu? Ma Song asked anxiously. There's nothing we can do. They can only depend on themselves. This is a hopeless situation, but at the very least, we've managed to lure out the main force of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Even though the remaining bandits and highwaymen outnumber them, their fighting prowess isn't as high as before. Given their capabilities, there's still hope for them to break out of the encirclement. God helps those who help themselves. They can't put all their hopes on us. Ma Song, release the whistling arrow and inform Zhang Lin and the others to prepare to break out, Wang Chong said. That wasn't what Wang Chong had planned. However, there was nothing on the battlefield that was immutable. A truly outstanding commander didn't carry out a plan meticulously, but to adapt to the situation and find the best way to deal with the enemy. Even though the situation had changed, it was still effective for Wang Chong. In the next instant, a whistling arrow whistled through the air, heading straight for Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Signal. Almost at the same time, upon hearing the agreed-upon signal, Zhang San straightened his back and his spirits rose. Wang Chong had said that as long as they heard the whistling arrow, they should prepare to break out of the encirclement. He would find a way to delay the main force of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Even though he had no idea how Wang Chong did it, and he had no idea why he was so confident that he could delay Iron Cloak Li and his men so that they wouldn't be able to retreat in time. But without a doubt, this was the content of the white cloth that Bai Siling had shot out previously. Brothers, abandon the fortifications and prepare to break out of the encirclement, Zhang Lin shouted. Nay. In the next moment, the neighing of war steeds could be heard as they charged out of the fortifications. The long-awaited sound of a war steed galloped across the hill once more. Everyone, listen to my command. There's still a group of elite highwaymen at the back of the main road, and it's impossible to save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Charge together and kill the highwaymen at the back to exact vengeance for Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Wang Chong suddenly unsheathed his sword and pointed behind him. Yes. Hearing that they couldn't save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, the eyes of the highwaymen reddened, and killing intent surged from their bodies. Hong Long Long. Under Wang Chong's command, the 40 Tang dynasty soldiers spread out and charged toward the main road in the east. The formation of the army was scattered, but not disorderly. Bastard! Hearing those words, Iron Cloak Li felt like his lungs were going to explode. Even though he hadn't participated in the operation personally, based on his understanding of Hu Lang, he knew that what Wang Chong said was true. There was definitely another group of brothers at the back of the main road. This ambush had cost at least 40 to 50 of his true martial realm subordinates, and Iron Cloak Li's heart was bleeding at this moment. If Wang Chong were to kill those elites at the back as well, the entire Iron Cloak highwaymen would be doomed. Back then, Iron Cloak Li had put in a lot of effort to gather these true martial realm brothers. This was the culmination of more than a decade of his efforts. If Wang Chong were to succeed, his many years of hard work would have been for naught. At this moment, Iron Cloak Li was starting to regret underestimating Zhang Xian too much. If only he had known that he would suffer such heavy losses, he would have killed that lad personally, even at the risk of exposing himself and letting some of the soldiers escape. To think that 40 men would be able to kill so many of his men. This was a huge blow that he had never suffered before. Everyone, listen to my orders and move together with me. Anyone who dares to escape will be killed without mercy. Iron Cloak Li's face darkened, and his furious roar echoed throughout the main road. Hong Long Long. The stampede of the war steeds caused all of the fleeing highwaymen to feel stifled, and they quickly merged into the crowd behind Iron Cloak Li. With Iron Cloak Li's appearance, the scattered highwaymen finally regained their morale. In the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Iron Cloak Li represented absolute strength, and there was no one who could stand against him. Follow the leader and kill those soldiers. Avenge our brothers. The highwaymen roared with courage once more. In fact, their morale was even higher than before. This time, other than the bandits they had relied on, the entire corps of the Iron Cloak highwaymen had been mobilized. With the 30 fleeing highwaymen and the 60 or so bandits behind Iron Cloak Li, the number of highwaymen had risen to 90. But unlike before, other than the elites of the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Iron Cloak Li was also mobilizing himself. Hong Long Long. Under Iron Cloak Li's lead, the morale of the bandits and highwaymen was greatly boosted, and the killing intent they exuded caused even the air to distort. Chase after them. Don't let them get away. A group of people with murderous intent followed closely behind him. This time, they wouldn't let them off no matter what. Unlike before, after several hundred zhang of galloping, the highwaymen had already pushed their speed to the limit. Their steeds were even faster than Wang Chong and the others. 100 zhang, 80 zhang, 70 zhang, the distance was getting shorter and shorter. Hong Long. But just as they were about 50 zhang away, something happened. Iron Cloak Li suddenly felt the ground beneath his feet buckling, and the ground beneath him suddenly caved in. This is bad. Alarmed, Iron Cloak Li immediately realized that he had fallen into a trap. He tried to rein in his steed, but it was already too late. When a steed's speed reached its limit, how could it possibly stop at a whim? Hong Long. With a deafening explosion and the neighing of a steed, Iron Cloak Li and his steed fell from the sky amidst a cloud of dust. Beneath him, a huge pit had appeared out of nowhere, and it was filled with wooden stakes. Chief. Not good. There's a trap ahead. Hurry up and stop. Someone tried to rein in his steed and stop the bandits behind him, but it was already too late. Even Iron Cloak Li's Fergana steed was unable to stop under such circumstances, let alone the bandits behind him. Nay. Chapter 353. Now's the time. From afar, Wang Chong could hear the continuous sounds of bodies falling to the ground and the neighing of war steeds. He knew that his plan had succeeded. Dual arrow formation. Charge. As soon as he said those words, the 40 war steeds came to a halt, and a deathly silence descended upon the world. However, this extreme silence gave off an extremely uneasy and austere feeling. Hong Long. The earth rumbled. 42 warhorses' manes fluttered in the wind as they neighed at the same time. In the blink of an eye, they turned around and formed into 2 arrow formations at the speed of lightning, shooting towards the direction behind the pit. Hong Long Long. With a deafening rumble, the 42 steeds formed into a dual arrow formation and charged right into the chaotic midst of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. No one could describe the impact of this collision. Countless highwaymen were sent flying, and some of their massive war steeds even collapsed. Be careful. The Imperial Army is here. Stop them. Shrill cries filled with extreme fear echoed across the entire path. Looking at the young figure at the very front of the group, fear and panic surfaced in the eyes of the highwaymen. That person. It was that young man from the Imperial Army again. At this point, close to 300 of his brothers had already died under the hands of the Tang dynasty's Imperial Army, and this included respected leaders like Hu Lang. Yet, despite the repeated battles, the casualties that he had suffered were negligible. At this moment, even the most ferocious, cruel, and fearless highwayman would feel a deep sense of fear upon seeing the cavalry led by that young man. Hung long long. Blood splattered everywhere, and severed limbs flew in the air. Just like before, Wang Chong's cavalry easily pierced through the group of highwaymen from the front to the back. What was different from before was that this time, there were two dual arrow formations piercing through them simultaneously. The war steeds and highwaymen were sent flying one after another, and a bone-chilling screech echoed across the entire path. Once, twice, the two vanguard arrow cavalrymen pierced through the gathered horse bandits repeatedly at an astonishing speed. The same scene repeated itself, and the horse bandits who had just gathered their morale collapsed once more. Furthermore, it was in front of an opponent who outnumbered them by a lot. Cavalry charges never required the same number of troops as the opponent. As long as they repeatedly penetrated the opponent's formation, dealt a blow to the opponent's morale, and messed up the opponent's formation, all they had to do next was harvest. Wang Chong had spent his entire life on the battlefield and had been a grand marshal of the army. He had commanded countless cavalry troops, so he was very clear about the charging characteristics of cavalry. On the battlefield, if the cavalry was used well, it would be an army of death that could reap lives in large swathes. They were just a bunch of highwaymen. They didn't even know the art of war, let alone the art of commanding cavalrymen. Success. Looking at the scattered highwaymen, Bai Siling was overjoyed. If it was before today, she would never have believed that she could face such a large number of opponents. Moreover, he could fight and survive. This was Bai Siling's first time witnessing the terrifying power of cavalry. This experience left an indelible impression on her for the rest of her life. This is great. Gongzi, you've succeeded. Ma Song's excitement and joy were similarly indescribable. As a veteran who had served in the army for more than a decade, Ma Song had followed many different commanders and participated in many battles. The battle with the highwaymen before him couldn't be considered as the most intense and dangerous battle he had ever experienced. In the midst of an intense battlefield, he could easily find countless battles that were far more dangerous than this one. No matter how powerful the highwaymen were, they couldn't compare to a regular army. But without a doubt, none of the commanders had left a deeper impression on him than the young man before him. To use 40 cavalrymen to fight against a group of highwaymen 10 times their number while sustaining minimal casualties, none of the commanders Ma Song had ever met could compare to the young man before him. The young man before him was extremely familiar with the tactics of cavalry. The might of 40 cavalrymen had been brought to full play under his command. In fact, Ma Song felt that there was no commander in the entire Tang dynasty who could bring out the might of cavalry better than Wang Chong. Hung long long. It was a crushing defeat. The cavalrymen led by Wang Chong didn't fight one-on-one. Instead, they gathered their superior strength and formed a formation to strike at the highwaymen repeatedly. Most of the time, the highwaymen weren't facing a single cavalryman but a group of cavalrymen. Such a tactic allowed them to defeat their opponents easily, and it also minimized the damage suffered by the cavalrymen to the minimum. Thus, even though the cavalrymen led by Wang Chong had suffered some casualties, they didn't suffer any casualties at all. In the eyes of others, such an outcome was simply like a miracle. It was unbelievable. But to Wang Chong, it couldn't be any more natural. Lad, do you think that you've won? Just as everyone was immersed in their joy, a fearsome voice that seemed to have come from the depths of hell suddenly echoed in everyone's ears. Everyone who heard this voice felt a bone-chilling coldness, as well as a strong sense of danger and unease. In that instant, even the air seemed to have frozen over. Wang! It was also at this moment, through the billowing dust, in the deep pit in front of them, everyone saw a tall and muscular silhouette, as strong as a giant elephant. The air that was mixed with dust twisted around him. Everyone who saw him could feel the thick and terrifying killing intent that was not concealed in the slightest. And what was even more unforgettable was the pair of cold, chilly eyes filled with killing intent in the dust. They didn't look like the eyes of a human, but more like the eyes of a demon. Not good. Wang Chang's heart skipped a beat. Almost instinctively, he felt a great sense of danger. Everyone, be careful. However, what was even faster than Wang Chang's voice was that demon-like silhouette. Neigh! The warhorse neighed. No one knew how that person moved. They only knew that when they saw him, he had already appeared beside a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty like an extremely dangerous beast. His steel-like shoulders contained boundless power as he ruthlessly slammed into the warhorse. The warhorse, which was as tall as a man and had a sturdy body and dense muscles, was almost instantly smashed into pieces by the explosive force. Along with the warhorse, the rider on the back of the warhorse was also smashed into pieces. Hong Long. Blood and broken pieces of flesh burst forth in all directions like a fountain. Everyone was dumbfounded by this blow, including Wang Chong. This was the first time Wang Chang's subordinates had suffered a casualty since the start of the battle with the Iron Cloak highwayman. Not to mention, both the man and his steed were crushed to smithereens. Iron Cloak Li's attack was simply too powerful. It didn't seem like something a human could do at all. Little Li. A sorrowful howl echoed in the air as a cavalryman suddenly left the formation and charged toward Iron Cloak Li like a madman. Humph, you're courting death. The cold voice was cold and emotionless. There was no surprise at all. Hong Long. In just a single strike, the Tang dynasty cavalryman and his steed were sent flying more than 10 zhang into the air. That terrifying strength gave people an unprecedented feeling of impact. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was the first time the leader of the Iron Cloak highwayman had made a move, and he had already displayed unparalleled strength. Be careful. Don't leave the formation. Charge forward. Wang Chang's anxious voice echoed across the sky. This was the first time he was witnessing Iron Cloak Li's strength, and it was even more fearsome than what Li Cangqi had described to him. Da. The first to move was the formation that Bai Xiling and Ma Song were in. They were the closest to Iron Cloak Li, so they were the first to move. Kill! 21 cavalrymen of Great Tang formed an arrow formation, and like a massive steel dragon, they charged toward Iron Cloak Li, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Humph. Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly as he looked at the incoming cavalryman, showing no intention of dodging at all. In his chest, there was a ball of rage burning. His killing intent felt as if it would tear the heavens apart. His many years of painstaking effort had been destroyed by Wang Chang's group of 40. In fact, even he himself was trapped in the pit dug by Wang Chong. Even the Fergana steed that had followed him for so many years had been impaled by a wooden stake in the pit, losing its life. Ever since he founded the Iron Cloak highwayman, Iron Cloak Li had never suffered such humiliation, let alone such a grievous blow. That darned brat. Iron Cloak Li clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged one after another. His intense rage caused his eyes to turn crimson. That was because his eyes were bloodshot. If looks could kill, Wang Chong and these cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty would have died many times over. Up till now, Iron Cloak Li's men had already lost more than 300 men. At the same time, his killing intent and rage had also reached a peak. Today, no matter what price he had to pay, he would kill Wang Chong and these 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. Nay! Amidst a cloud of dust, the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty were getting closer and closer to him. The rumbling of the hooves caused even his clothes to flutter. But Iron Cloak Li had no intention of retreating at all. Not only that, he even stood before the Tang dynasty cavalryman and slowly closed his eyes. Hong Long. Time seemed to have slowed down innumerable times, and before countless gazes, a pair of powerful hooves pierced through the smoke and dust, striking heavily against Iron Cloak Li's chest like a mountain. When the hooves struck against Iron Cloak Li's body, a deafening metallic reverberation sounded. Iron Cloak Li stood in front of the pit like an immovable mountain, and the cavalrymen charging at him were repelled by the force of the impact. Wang! At this moment, everyone was stunned. How is this possible? Chapter 354. To think that a body of flesh and blood would actually be able to withstand the full might of a true martial realm cavalryman, and on top of that, he was able to withstand the full might of a true martial realm cavalryman. If not for them witnessing it with their own eyes, they would have found it hard to believe. But all of this was happening right before their eyes. It's my turn. A cold voice filled with rage echoed in everyone's ears, but Iron Cloak Lee had already vanished from everyone's sight. Pang! As if struck by an invisible hand, the first cavalryman was sent flying along with his steed. After which, the second, third, and fourth cavalrymen followed suit. The sharpest arrow tip of the entire arrow formation, which should have been the one with the greatest power, was forcibly shattered and sent flying by someone's flesh and blood. The strong warhorses, which could crush stone tablets with their feet, let out mournful cries. Wherever they were hit, their bones and internal organs would collapse into the ground. With every punch, a well-trained warhorse that had been on the battlefield for a long time would be sent flying and killed. Boom! Iron Cloak Lee single-handedly knocked back 5 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty and shattered the sharpest of the arrow formation. Then, with a flicker, he appeared beside another cavalryman of the Tang dynasty and rammed his shoulder against Nei's steed, sending yet another cavalryman and his steed flying. Chi! With a bellow, a white streak of light flashed, and a 3-chi-long sword flew toward Iron Cloak Lee's head at an astonishing speed. Boom! Iron Cloak Lee's face turned cold. Clang! But when the sharp sword struck Iron Cloak Lee's body, it felt as if it had struck an invisible layer of steel, preventing the sword from piercing through his body. Iron Cloak Lee pushed his palms forward. Boom! With a scream of agony, Bai Siling was sent flying before crashing heavily into the ground, blood spurting from her mouth. Before the head of the Iron Cloak bandits, even a genius from Longwei training camp like Bai Siling was no match for him. Siling! Wang Chong turned pale with fright. He knew how high Bai Siling's cultivation was. She was an existence on par with Marchioness Yi and cousin Wang Zhuyan. In just one move, Bai Siling was severely injured. Iron Cloak Lee's strength was truly frightening. Junior, be careful. His iron cloak is impervious to swords and blades. My sword can't hurt him. Bai Siling propped herself up from the ground, her face as pale as paper. If not for her superior cultivation allowing her to protect her internal organs with her stellar energy, she would have died from that palm strike from Iron Cloak Lee. Puff! As soon as Bai Siling finished speaking, she felt a sweetness in her throat. Her chi and blood surged, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Her heart was filled with even more fear. From the start of the battle until now, at least 5 cavalrymen and their steeds had died in the hands of this bandit leader. Even she herself had sustained severe injuries. This kind of loss was unprecedented. Iron Cloak Lee's strength was simply too frightening. Little lass, it seems like you are quite concerned about that lad. After I kill that lad, I'll kill you as well. Today, all of you will die. Iron Cloak Lee's killing intent surged as he single-handedly destroyed an arrow formation. Then, ignoring the others, he charged right for the second arrow formation that Wang Chong was in. Without any intention of dodging, Iron Cloak Lee charged right for the sharpest and strongest point of the arrow formation. Hong Long! At least 5 spears carrying the might of a mountain struck Iron Cloak Lee's body simultaneously from 5 different directions. However, all of the spears were blocked by the black iron cloak around Iron Cloak Lee's body. The spears that could pierce through metal and fling a man and his steed into the air were completely ineffective against Iron Cloak Lee's armor. Rise! Iron Cloak Lee stood as firm as a mountain, but the 5 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty were flung away together with their steeds. Peng peng peng! Steeds were sent flying one after another. Many of them fell to the ground with their necks snapped, and some even had their innards ruptured. Ney's cries of agony lingered in the air. Lad, die. A cold glint flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as he stared at Wang Chong. As the instigator of all this, Iron Cloak Li placed all the blame on Wang Chong. If not for him, the cavalryman wouldn't have been able to deal so much damage. If not for him, Hu Lang wouldn't have died, his beloved steed would still be alive, and his subordinates wouldn't have lost so many elites. How could Iron Cloak Li tolerate the destruction of his many years of hard work? He could spare any of the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, but he had to get rid of this young man who had come from the training camps. So, with a flash of light, Iron Cloak Li raised his arm, and a black shadow shot out from his body. As if it had a life of its own, the black stellar energy cloak darted toward Wang Chong. Hong Long. With a deafening explosion, a cloud of dust rose from where the black cloak landed, and all the rocks in the area were reduced to dust. On the other hand, Wang Chong had managed to dodge the attack by a hair's breadth. The white-hoofed shadow's divine beauty, mysticism, and sensitivity to danger had saved Wang Chong's life at the crucial moment. Nay! Iron Cloak Li turned around and saw a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty charging toward him fearlessly while he was attacking Wang Chong. Humph! Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly. Boom! With a thought, the black stellar energy cloak flew up and expanded before falling from the sky, enveloping the cavalryman of the Tang dynasty along with his steed. Ka-cha-cha! With a series of cracking sounds, the Tang cavalryman wrapped in the black chainmail began to rapidly shrink, blood gushing out like a river. In the blink of an eye, the cavalryman of the Tang dynasty had been crushed into a ball of flesh, and he fell from the black cloak. Nay! Seeing this scene, the warhorses were frightened. They reared up and retreated. Wang Chong felt a chill run down his spine. If he had been just a little bit slower, he would have been the one reduced to a ball of flesh. Brat, you won't be able to escape. Iron Cloak Li stood motionlessly on the spot, but his cold and murderous eyes were locked onto Wang Chong. Who? Iron Cloak Li waved his hand, and the black stellar energy cloak descended from the sky to cover his body once more. There wasn't the slightest speck of blood on it. Chief is formidable. Chief! Chief! Upon seeing this sight, the Iron Cloak highwaymen who were fleeing in all directions were invigorated, and they began to cheer loudly. Let's go. Let's help Chief exterminate those soldiers. Brothers, it's time for vengeance. Chief, well done. Brothers, kill. The sound of galloping hooves could be heard from all directions, and the bandits, who had scattered like birds and beasts, let out excited cries as they charged back from all directions. The tables had suddenly turned, and the situation had become extremely disadvantageous to them. Iron Cloak Li had single-handedly reversed the tides of the battle. Chief, we're here to help you. A ferocious and bloodthirsty roar sounded from afar. On the east side of the main road, a group of 30 Iron Cloak highwaymen swept up a cloud of dust as they charged toward Zhang Xian's direction. The 30 elite highwaymen that Hu Lang had stationed at the rear had finally heard the commotion and rushed over. Wang! In that instant, even Wang Chong's face warped in horror. Iron Cloak Li, who was invulnerable to swords and spears, was already a difficult opponent to deal with. On top of that, the highwaymen who had retreated and the 30 elite highwaymen were also backing them up. The situation had become extremely disadvantageous to them. The worst thing was that this time, they were at a disadvantage, and even their escape route had been cut off. And after Iron Cloak Li had destroyed the arrow formation, the most important factor of the Iron Cloak cavalry's charge was speed. Without the speed that they prided themselves on, they would be no different from infantry. In fact, they might even be inferior to infantry. In that instant, everyone could feel the heavy stench of death. The hurried galloping was like an invisible string that tugged at everyone's nerves. Lord, what do we do? A squad leader looked uneasily at Wang Chong, his eyes brimming with anxiety and expectation. Even a soldier like him, who didn't know the slightest about strategy, could sense danger from the current situation. Furthermore, it wasn't the danger of getting injured or dying, but the danger of the entire army being wiped out. Lord! Lord! Time seemed to have come to a halt at this instant. In Wang Cheng's eyes, this short instant felt like an eternity. Wang Cheng could see the corpses of the warhorses and the decapitated cavalrymen on the path. In the distance, Bai Xiling was clutching her chest as she struggled to stand up. The immense pain and internal injuries she had sustained had caused her beautiful face to warp in agony. Ma Song was also severely injured. The corpse of a warhorse was pressing down on his leg, and his eyebrows were tightly knitted together in pain. A true martial realm expert could easily lift up a warhorse, but Ma Song couldn't even lift his leg. Dust and sand filled the air, and fresh blood flowed freely on the grass on both sides of the path. In the distance, the highwaymen were charging over savagely, brandishing their swords and sabers. Even further away, the group of elite mounted gangsters who were hiding in ambush were also rushing over. And at the very center of all these troops, Iron Cloak Li was currently sending a steed flying with a single punch. Like an insurmountable wall, Iron Cloak Li stood right in front of Wang Cheng, as well as everyone else. His cold gaze pierced through space and time, locking onto Wang Cheng. Death followed him like a shadow. In a short period of time, Wang Cheng had fallen into a perilous situation where his entire army was being wiped out. Everyone, retreat. Hong Long. Wang Cheng suddenly charged forward, and grabbing Bai Xiling, he placed her on the back of his steed. At the same time, he issued the final and most important command of the entire battle. Execute the plan, 8 claws fishing the moon. Chapter 355. Hong Long. In an instant, all of the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty who were charging toward Iron Cloak Li suddenly scattered in all directions. Every single one of the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty chose a different direction. Even Wang Cheng was fleeing together with them. Putting aside the Iron Cloak highwaymen, even Iron Cloak Li was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. They are escaping. Don't let them get away. Stop them. Our leader is formidable. The highwaymen seemed to have been injected with a shot of adrenaline as they roared in excitement. Too powerful, too powerful. As expected of their leader. Those formidable soldiers had killed countless of their brothers, and even Hu Lang was dead. Countless of their elite brothers had perished in battle as well. Yet, their leader had single-handedly defeated all of them. He was no different from a god. Brothers, hurry up and charge. Let's help our leader kill them. The bloodthirst and killing intent in the hearts of the highwaymen was ignited. As highwaymen and bandits, even though they were in a disadvantageous position, they were unable to muster up the will to fight. But once they gained the upper hand, they would be able to bring out 120% of their fighting prowess. Kill! Their deafening roars caused the entire forest to tremble, and the highwaymen ran even faster. It seems like these fellows are still useful. Iron Cloak Li looked at the highwaymen and bandits charging in from all directions and heard the deafening roars, and his tightly knitted brows finally relaxed a little. Turning around to look at the fleeing cavalrymen, Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly in his heart. Those fellows were way too naive to think that they could escape at this moment. Even though Hu Lang had misjudged the other party and fell for their trap, he had made the wrong move. The 30 elites had completely cut off the path of retreat of Wang Cheng and the others. At this moment, the soldiers of the Tang dynasty were like turtles in a cage, and it was impossible for them to escape. Buzz! Just as Iron Cloak Li was about to give chase, an abrupt turn of events occurred. Before everyone's astonished gazes, the cavalrymen who had already fled a dozen zhang away suddenly turned around simultaneously and charged toward Iron Cloak Li. Boom! In an instant, the 30 warhorses' speed soared to the limit. 30 steeds and 30 cavalrymen charged at Iron Cloak Li with all their might. Not only that, In the process of charging, the 30 warhorses began to change rapidly, and the originally disorderly troops began to show distinct echelons. Upon closer inspection, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a total of 8 echelons. Although the number of people in each echelon varied, it was still obvious that there were 8 echelons. Wang Chong himself also joined the echelon to make up for the loss of members in the echelon. What's going on? What are they doing? All of the highwaymen were stunned. The highwaymen thought that Wang Chong and the others had been intimidated by their leader and were preparing to escape. As such, their main objective was to surround them and stop them from escaping. But who could have thought that they would suddenly turn around and charge right back at them? What are you all waiting for? Hurry up, they want to make a move on our leader. Stop them and kill them all. A loud bellow suddenly broke the silence. Saber roared furiously as he whipped the butt of his steed and galloped forward. Of all of them, he was the only one who could sense the danger their leader was in. Without a doubt, these people were intending to make use of their advantage in numbers to deal with their leader. Even though 10 true martial realm brothers wouldn't be a match for their leader on the mountain, there were far more than just 10 true martial realm cavalrymen here. Hung Long Long. Seated on the back of his steed, Wang Chong stared fixedly at Iron Cloak Li, the head of the Iron Cloak bandits, standing before the pit. To shoot a man, one must first shoot the horse. To capture the bandits, one must first capture the leader. Wang Chong was well aware that the situation before him was one of certain death. Regardless of whether it was Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, or him and Bai Siling, they were all surrounded. Iron Cloak Li had single-handedly turned the tides of the battle around. There was only one way to break out of this predicament and turn defeat into victory. Kill Iron Cloak Li. Iron Cloak Li was the crux to everything. As long as they could kill him, the morale of the highwaymen would crumble. All of the strength that they had attached themselves to Iron Cloak Li would dissipate. The highwaymen were adept at taking advantage of others' misfortune and beating them down. If they were in an advantageous position, their fighting prowess might even surpass that of the official army. But if they were to fall into a disadvantageous position, their morale would crumble and they would scatter. It was impossible for the highwaymen to defend their honor and fight to the last man. Siling, are you ready? Wang Chong asked. I understand. Seated in front of Wang Chong, Bai Siling gritted her teeth as a sliver of determination flashed across her eyes. Even though Wang Chong didn't say it out loud, Bai Siling knew that they only had a single chance, and they didn't have much time left. This was the last chance to cut off all means of retreat. If they couldn't kill Iron Cloak Li and the highwaymen were to surround them, only death would await them. Nay! The steeds neighed as the cavalrymen charged toward Iron Cloak Li with an unwavering momentum. In that instant, the atmosphere had reached an unprecedented level, and the stench of despair permeated the air. I'll make sure that all of you give up on me. Iron Cloak Li's cold voice was neither loud nor soft, but it was clearly resounding in everyone's ears. In the face of Yuma, who was charging at him like a torrent of steel, Iron Cloak Li stood firmly like an immovable mountain as a powerful aura burst forth from his body. If they thought that they could kill him with their advantage in numbers, he could only say that they were too naive. Wang! A black stellar energy cloak enveloped Iron Cloak Li from head to toe, and the metallic buzzing reverberated ceaselessly, leaving one's heart palpitating. Come! With a cold glint in his eyes, before Wang Chong's cavalrymen could reach him, Iron Cloak Li suddenly charged toward the first group of 5 cavalrymen and launched an attack. Hung Long Long, as though a massive boulder had smashed into the ground, Iron Cloak Li and his stellar energy cloak crashed into the midst of the cavalrymen like a meteor. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the cavalrymen neighed in agony, and the steel spears shattered. In just a single strike, Iron Cloak Li had defeated the first group of 5 cavalrymen led by Wang Chong. The immense force sent the 5 cavalrymen and their steeds flying into the air. Screams of agony and the neighs of the cavalrymen intertwined together, and fresh blood permeated the air. Many of the cavalrymen had their chests caved in, and even their bones were exposed. It was a tragic sight. But regardless of whether it was Wang Chong or the other cavalrymen, none of them hesitated upon seeing this sight. Life or death. This was the predicament placed in front of everyone, and it was also the only choice. They had to kill Iron Cloak Li, or else they would suffer the same fate as the cavalrymen. You're overestimating yourselves. There's no way any of you are a match for me. Iron Cloak Li's eyes were cold and savage. Boom! Before Wang Chong could charge over, Iron Cloak Li had already charged toward another group of cavalrymen. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's fist struck the side of the cavalryman's steed, piercing the armor protecting the side of the horse along with his fist. Fresh blood spurted out. After the boundless astral energy entered through the ribs, it shot out from the back of the rider on horseback. Ah! Amidst the screams of agony, fresh blood spurted from the gaping hole in the cavalryman's back, splattering all over Iron Cloak Li's face. But that only served to further intensify the rage in his heart. This wasn't the first time he had killed an official of the royal court, but it was the most exciting and stimulating one he had ever done so far. The feeling of being in control of the entire situation was what one sought after the most. In fact, Iron Cloak Li could feel that his Iron Cloak art was on the verge of achieving a breakthrough under the stimulation of his emotions. I'll kill every single one of you. That cold, sinister, and tyrannical voice came from Iron Cloak Li's throat. Boom boom boom. Iron Cloak Li used his shoulder, elbow, and fist simultaneously to send another 4 cavalrymen and their steeds flying. Let me kill every single one of you. Iron Cloak Li's figure blurred as he charged toward another group of cavalrymen. His movement technique was extremely nimble, and he didn't stay on the spot at all. This made it impossible for Wang Chong to gather the strength of 30 cavalrymen to attack him at the same time. Iron Cloak Li was confident in his strength, but he wasn't a fool. With his overwhelming strength and the Iron Cloak technique, as long as he didn't stay in the same spot, he could easily defeat Wang Chong one by one and kill them all. Hung long long. Just as Iron Cloak Li was charging toward another group of cavalrymen, a sudden change occurred. Just several zhang away from Iron Cloak Li, the group of cavalrymen suddenly made a sharp turn and charged in another direction. Even Iron Cloak Li was taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. But an even more abrupt change occurred later on. In the instant that this group of cavalrymen disappeared, another group of cavalrymen suddenly appeared in Iron Cloak Li's sight. In just an instant, a spear formation of 5 cavalrymen struck Iron Cloak Li with all their might. Peng 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 peng. At the same time, 5 spears from the second row struck Iron Cloak Li from another direction. Even though Iron Cloak Li's position was constantly changing, the 10 spears and the 10 cavalrymen seemed to have been rehearsed countless times in advance, striking Iron Cloak Li accurately from all directions. Chapter 356. Boom! Amidst a furious gale and stellar energy, the 10 spears struck Iron Cloak Li simultaneously. Even with the protection of the black stellar energy Iron Cloak Li was still jolted by the impact, and his face reddened to the point where fresh blood seemed to be seeping out from it. From the start of the battle, this was the first time Iron Cloak Li had shown any signs of strain. This is a good chance. Wang Chong's eyes lit up. Riding on the back of the white-hoofed shadow, Wang Chong and Bai Siling charged toward Iron Cloak Li, hiss. With a roar, a white streak of light shot forward. Bai Siling had become one with her sword, and the halo of thorns around her vibrated intensely as she slashed down toward Iron Cloak Li's head. Boom boom boom. Amidst the intense tremors, time seemed to have come to a standstill. Iron Cloak Li's body swelled up, and veins bulged all over his 8 chi tall body, revealing a look of pain on his face. Outside his body, however, the black chainmail, which had expanded to around 9 feet in size, continued to protect him like a fortress. Be it the full might of the 10 steeds, Wang Chang's charge, or by Siling's full strength strike, none of them were able to do a thing to the black iron cloak Li. It's useless. You won't be able to pierce through my iron cloak. Ah! Iron Cloak Li's hoarse voice soon turned into a scream of agony. The sword case shattered, and with a cold gleam, a 3 chi long sword inscribed with innumerable intricate patterns pierced through Iron Cloak Li's Iron Cloak Li and stabbed into Wang Chang's back. What kind of sword is this? No sword can pierce through my Iron Cloak Li's Iron Cloak Li. Iron Cloak Li's screams of agony reverberated in the air as the black Iron Cloak Li forcefully clamped down on Wang Chang's sword. Hong Long. A black torrent of stellar energy abruptly burst forth from Iron Cloak Li's body, accompanied by a martial halo that seemed to be made of metal and metal. Boom! 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 With a series of loud explosions, Wang Chong, Bai Siling, and the 10 Tang dynasty cavalrymen were all blown away by the blast. Bang! Wang Chong was sent tumbling several times by the violent shockwave. He slammed his palm on the ground and used a few techniques to deflect the force of the shockwave before stabbing his sword into the ground. Only then did he manage to stabilize himself. But even so, he still felt a sweet taste in his throat, and the blood in his body surged. This guy is too powerful. Wang Chang's heart thumped rapidly. 10 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, along with him and Bai Siling, were actually unable to do anything to Iron Cloak Li. This kind of strength was enough to make people despair. Brat, what kind of sword is that in your hand? A bone-chilling voice filled with boundless killing intent suddenly sounded in Wang Chang's ears. Raising his head, he saw Iron Cloak Li's towering figure standing on the ground, glaring at him like a venomous snake. The reason why Iron Cloak Li dared to challenge the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen, including Wang Chong, was because of his powerful Iron Cloak art. This cultivation technique created a stellar energy cloak that was impervious to swords and spears, as tough as metal. No matter how fanciful a martial art was, if it couldn't break through the Iron Cloak Li's stellar energy cloak, it would be nothing more than an embroidered pillow. Furthermore, the defensive prowess of the Iron Cloak Li far exceeded that of a true martial realm expert. Relying on this Iron Cloak Li's offensive and defensive prowess, he had already killed more than 10 Tang dynasty cavalrymen by Wang Chang's side, and all of them were killed along with their steeds. But just a moment ago, Iron Cloak Li's greatest trump card had been pierced through by a sword, and the sword had even pierced through his back. This was the first time such a situation had happened. Not even the treasured swords and sabers of the swordsmithing clans of the capital had been able to harm his stellar energy iron cloak. Even those top-class swords and sabers could only pierce through his stellar energy iron cloak, not pierce through it and stab deep into his back like Wang Chang's sword had. The effectiveness of the Iron Cloak Li had been weakened by at least 60%. For the first time, fear surfaced in Iron Cloak Li's eyes, but at the same time, he was determined to kill Wang Chong. He couldn't allow such a weapon to exist. At the very least, he couldn't allow it to appear in the hands of his enemy. However, Wang Chong paid no heed to Iron Cloak Li at all, as though he hadn't heard a single word. Everyone, dismount from your steeds and fend off the bandits with your steeds. Kill the Iron Cloak Bandit Chief. Wang Chong commanded grimly. The rumbling of the hooves of the Iron Cloak highwaymen was swiftly approaching them. It would only take a few seconds at most for the highwaymen to arrive, and the only thing that awaited them would be a crushing defeat and a complete wipeout. 80 experienced cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty would die humiliatingly in the hands of a bunch of bandits. But even at this moment, Wang Chong still didn't give up. He calmly issued his final command. Jaya! The training of the Tang dynasty army was on full display at this moment. All of the surviving cavalrymen carried out Wang Chong's orders perfectly. The 20 or so cavalrymen leaped down from their steeds and patted their steeds viciously, sending them galloping in all directions to obstruct the bandits who were charging in from all directions. Every batch of warhorses of the Great Tang had undergone strict training, systematic selection, and then a long period of nurturing before being bred again. To a cavalryman, every single steed wasn't just a simple mount. They were companions, friends, and a part of their bodies. Unless one was facing death or retirement, no one would abandon their steed. Without their steeds, cavalrymen could no longer be called cavalrymen. Instead, they were infantrymen and warriors. However, there was another more important duty of a soldier, and that was to follow orders. Regardless of whether it was their steed or themselves, they were willing to give up anything for the sake of their goal. Dying in battle was the fate of a soldier, as well as their honor. Every single cavalryman who stepped onto the battlefield was prepared to face death at any moment. The situation in front of them no longer gave them the space to turn around and launch a second charge. Driving the steeds out to block the bandits was their only chance. But even so, it wasn't enough to stop them for too long. If they couldn't end the battle swiftly and kill Iron Cloak Li, everyone here would have to die. Wang Cheng's actions might seem risky, but it was the best decision he could make at this moment. Wang. As soon as the 20 cavalrymen landed on the ground, they charged toward Iron Cloak Li. Seeing that Wang Cheng was ignoring him, Iron Cloak Li couldn't help but fly into a rage. You want to die? Fine, I'll grant you your wish. Iron Cloak Li's face darkened, and a savage glint flickered in his eyes. As a bandit who made a living through robbery, which one of them didn't make a name for themselves through slaughter? In fact, Iron Cloak Li even dared to kill soldiers. Wang. A halo extended from beneath Iron Cloak Li's feet, followed by a second, a third, a fourth. A total of 5 identical true martial realm halos extended from beneath Iron Cloak Li's feet, illuminating the surroundings, making Iron Cloak Li look like a god of war. True martial realm 5 Dan. The 5 identical concentric halos of thorns were a clear indication of Iron Cloak Li's true cultivation. Upon reaching the true martial realm, one would be able to form a halo that harnessed the laws of the world and possessed unique effects. As the strength of the halo increased, it would split into a halo of the same attribute every time it advanced to a higher level. Such a halo could reach a maximum of 9 tiers. The more halos there were, the greater the strength and speed one possessed, and the more powerful the laws of the world would be. Iron Cloak Li's 5 halos had already surpassed most of the Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, and it was more than enough to crush them. Roar! Roaring furiously, the 20-odd cavalrymen charged toward Iron Cloak Li. But they weren't the ones to make the first move. Boom! With a flash of light, the stellar energy Iron Cloak descended from the sky and enveloped one of the Tang Dynasty cavalrymen. Ka-cha-cha! A series of jarring sounds echoed, and blood spurted out from beneath the iron cloak. At the same time, the Tang Dynasty cavalryman was reduced to a pile of mangled flesh. All of you, all of you, all of you, all of you. Die! A savage gleam flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as he waved his right hand to summon back his stellar energy iron cloak. Then, his figure flashed as he charged toward the crowd. Boom! More than 10 halos of thorns shot forth from all directions, clashing with one another and clashing with the 5 black halos around Iron Cloak Li's body. The halos of different attributes twisted violently in the air like giant gears, clashing, clashing, and pulling against one another. The sound of metal clanking echoed endlessly. The white shockwaves from the collision of stellar energy surged several dozen zhang into the sky, raising sand and dust that filled the air. But the side with more halos wasn't a match for the 5 black halos at all. But without their steeds, these cavalrymen could only be considered foot soldiers. They were far from being able to bring out the fearsome might of their steeds. Single character consecutive slash. Just as everyone's true martial halo was being suppressed by Iron Cloak Li, Wang Chong suddenly shot forth like a cannonball from the ground, appearing right above Iron Cloak Li's head in the blink of an eye. Even though Wang Chong's cultivation realm was beneath that of the others, his strength, movement technique, agility, and speed were far above that of the others. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Iron Cloak Li narrowed his eyes, and a hint of nervousness surfaced in his eyes. While Wang Chong's strength wasn't worth a mention, the sword in his hand was the greatest threat to his Iron Cloak technique. Come! Iron Cloak Li's figure blurred as he abruptly leaped into the air. Gathering stellar energy in his right fist, he sent a powerful punch toward Wang Chong. Chapter 357. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's punch landed on thin air. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's punch landed, but it struck nothing but air. The Wang Chong in midair dissipated into an afterimage, and the real Wang Chong appeared behind Iron Cloak Li. Even Iron Cloak Li was fooled by the phantom steps created by the single consecutive slash. Iron Cloak Li's face tensed up, and the black stellar energy iron cloak he was wearing swiftly morphed, forming layers upon layers of iron cloak. Clang! To think that Wang Chong's surekill attack would be blocked. Humph! Harumphing coldly, Iron Cloak Li sent a punch behind him. Lad, you're thinking too simply. Do you think that my iron cloak technique can only allow me to take a beating? Even if you have such a powerful weapon, you won't be able to break my iron cloak technique. Is that so? Give it a try then. A young, bone-chilling voice sounded by Iron Cloak Li's ear. This was the first time Wang Chong had responded to Iron Cloak Li. Everyone, work together with me. Attack! At the same time, Wang Chong also executed his strongest attack. 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. The roars of innumerable dragons echoed in the air, and the silhouettes of flood dragons appeared in everyone's ears. At the same time, the sound of metal clanging echoed in the air, and the halos of true martial realms surged toward Iron Cloak Li from all directions. At this moment, a sliver of danger finally surfaced in Iron Cloak Li's eyes. His iron cloak technique was extremely flexible, and he was able to strengthen the defense of a certain part of his body through overlapping one another. As such, he was able to block even Wang Chong's Wuzi steel sword. But at the same time, when the defense of a troop was strengthened, the defense of the other parts of the troop would be weakened. If he were to deal with Wang Chong alone, he would still be able to deal with him. But if he were to face the other Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, his stellar energy iron cloak technique would be severely lacking. Neigh! All of a sudden, the neighing of a horse sounded from outside. Leader, let me help you. Before his voice faded away, a muscular man with bare arms and strong muscles leaped into the air, leaping over. At this moment, Chang Dao, one of Iron Cloak Li's subordinates, finally arrived. Leader, let me help you. Leader, let me help you. Brothers, kill these soldiers and avenge our fallen brothers. A series of neighing sounds could be heard as one highwayman after another was slaughtered. Charging through the outer perimeters, the highwaymen charged in with killing intent. Ha ha ha. Good, good. Just in time. Hearing the voice, Iron Cloak Li's spirit was invigorated. Wang Chong's Wuzi steel sword had forced him into a corner, and he had no choice but to seek help from others. The appearance of the horse gang was just in time. Brat, let's see how long you can last. Just accept your fate obediently. A powerful burst of stellar energy burst forth from Iron Cloak Li's body, and he actually managed to withstand Wang Chong's 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. Neigh! The neighing of the highwaymen grew louder and louder, and the faces of the cavalrymen warped in horror. Wang Chong and Bai Siling's faces paled, and their hearts sank to the bottom of an abyss. Even if they had the Wuzi steel sword, it was already too late. Their final chance had failed as well. What awaited them now was the order to wipe them out. Everyone, listen up. Ignore everything else and focus on attacking Iron Cloak Lee. Even if we die, we must drag him down with us. A resolute gleam flashed across Wang Chang's eyes as his resounding voice echoed in everyone's ears. Right after those words were spoken, Wang Chong executed the single character consecutive slash once more, and with a flicker, he charged toward Iron Cloak Lee. Brat, no matter what happens to the others, I will kill you today. Iron Cloak Lee flew into a rage. Wang Chong was already on the brink of death, and yet, the other party was still thinking of dragging him down with him. This infuriated Iron Cloak Lee to the point where he felt like his lungs were about to explode. It was this brat's fault that so many of them were killed by the 40 cavalrymen. Iron Cloak Lee could ignore the others. But Iron Cloak Lee was determined to kill this brat. I would like to see how an ant who hasn't even reached true martial realm like you will be able to kill me. Iron Cloak Lee's eyes were brimming with killing intent. His body swayed, and like a hawk, he soared into the sky. Wang! There was a flash of light, and a black silhouette flew out from his body to envelop Wang Chong. Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. At the very last moment, Iron Cloak Lee finally brought out his strongest Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. He wanted to shroud Wang Chong in his Stellar Energy Iron Cloak just like the other cavalrymen, crushing the latter's bones and turning him into a bloody mess. Only then would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart and the rage he felt from losing so many of his elite subordinates. He wouldn't let anyone else do the dirty work of this brat, he would kill him personally. Wang! Movement in the air wasn't as convenient as on the ground, and without the help of the white-hoofed shadow, Wang Chong wasn't going to be as lucky as before. Wang! With a flash of light, the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak fell from the sky and enveloped both Wang Chong and his sword. Even if Wang Chang's sword could pierce through the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak, there was no doubt that he would die this time. With the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak restraining Wang Chong, it was also restraining his sword. This time, nothing could threaten him. Xiling, now is the time. Strike! Just as Iron Cloak Lee was about to crush Wang Chong into a ball of flesh, Wang Chang's shrill voice suddenly sounded from beneath the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. What is that? Iron Cloak Lee's heart jolted in alarm. No matter how slow he was, he could tell that something was amiss. For a young soldier to be ordered to do something even though he was on the verge of death, it couldn't be anything good. He couldn't help but feel as if he had been schemed against. Hiss! Before he could figure out what was wrong, he suddenly heard a bellow by his ear, accompanied by the shrill whistle of a sharp object piercing through the air. Iron Cloak Lee felt as if the voice was right beside his ear. Had it been any other time, Iron Cloak Lee would have been able to dodge it easily. But in order to deal with Wang Chong, his body was in the air, and his movements weren't as convenient as before. Hong Long. In that instant, Iron Cloak Lee only had the time to gather all of his stellar energy and send out a palm strike before a sword pierced through his neck. Iron Cloak Lee's powerful stellar energy was actually unable to stop it in the slightest. That sword. Looking at the familiar tip of the sword protruding from his neck, a gleam of understanding flashed across Iron Cloak Lee's eyes. After which, his vision turned dark, and he lost consciousness. Leader! A shrill cry echoed in the air. To the highwaymen who had rushed over ferociously, what they saw was a sight that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. A young white-clothed girl became one with her sword in the void and pierced through the leader's neck with her sword. Just when everyone was at their happiest, most excited, and most in the upper hand, their leader was stabbed to death. In that instant, everyone felt their limbs turning cold, and their hearts plummeted to the depths of the abyss. Assassinated! Assassinated! To think that he would be assassinated. At this moment, time seemed to have come to a standstill. Even the neighing of the warhorses had been suppressed. To the highwaymen who were galloping over from afar, there was no doubt in their minds. They could see everything clearly. At the very last moment of victory, the young soldier had suddenly used himself as bait to steal the stellar energy iron cloak from their leader. At the same time, the divine weapon he was carrying had slipped away from the stellar energy iron cloak, drawing an arc in the air before falling into the hands of the young white-robed lady. The latter had relied on that divine weapon to become one with the sword and pierce through the leader's neck, ending the entire battle and changing the outcome of the battle. Just like that, a sure-win battle had been reversed. So, with Iron Cloak Li's death, the stellar energy iron cloak dissipated, and Wang Chong immediately fell from it. Pang! Pang! Pressing his palm against the ground, Wang Chong leaped forward and sliced off Iron Cloak Li's head with a single slash. Iron Cloak Li is dead. Anyone who dares to go against the army will only be courting death. Even if he escapes to the western regions, he'll still be doomed. Holding the sword in his right hand and grabbing Iron Cloak Li's head with his left, Wang Chong stared at the highwaymen with a cold gaze reminiscent of a deity, instilling fear in them. Hu Lang was dead, more than 80 of their brothers were dead, and more than 100 of their elite bandits were dead as well. Now, even their invincible leader had fallen under the schemes of this young man. At this very moment, even someone as ferocious as Chang Dao couldn't help but shudder in fear at the sight of that young man. No one knew what the young man was up to, and no one knew what tricks he had up his sleeves. The 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen had killed their leader and more than 200 of their brothers. How many of the remaining 20-odd men should they kill? At this moment, even the most ferocious of bandits couldn't help but feel fearful. The morale of the army had completely crumbled. When their leader was around, they still had a reason to fight for him. But now, that reason no longer existed. Even if they managed to kill these soldiers by a fluke, it would be meaningless. Not only would they not gain anything from this, they might even lose their lives. What are you waiting for? Scram! Raising his head, Wang Chong stepped forward and bellowed. In an instant, the bandits seemed to have awoken from a dream. Hong Long Long, as though they had received a huge fright, the bandits of the various strongholds scattered in all directions. Following that, a large group of highwaymen also scattered in all directions, devoid of fighting spirit. In just an instant, the 80 highwaymen and bandits had been completely wiped out. Lord, we've won. A surviving Tang dynasty cavalryman walked over and exhaled deeply. We've won, but we haven't won yet. Let's go, we still have one last thing to do. Shaking his head, Wang Chong raised his head and gazed at a corner in the distance. The battle cries were getting louder and louder. Chapter 358. On the slope around the corner, the battle was extremely intense. Like a tsunami, the bandits surged towards Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Bad news. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. All of a sudden, smoke and dust billowed from behind the corner. A bandit rode over on a horse and stumbled his way to Zhou En's side. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. The chief is. The highwayman kneeling on the ground stuttered in fear. He pointed a finger outside, but he was unable to finish his words clearly. Pa! In midair, a palm suddenly stretched out and slapped the highwayman's face. Bastard, speak clearly. What happened to the chief? Zhou En roared furiously. That bastard kept saying that the chief was in trouble, but he was unable to explain what was going on. This was truly infuriating. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. The chief has been killed. The highwayman kneeling on the ground was stunned for a moment. This time, he was more articulate, and he managed to finish his words in a single breath. Hong Long. It was like a stone that gave rise to 1,000 ripples. An ordinary sentence from this bandit was like a heavy bomb that gave rise to a tempestuous storm in everyone's hearts. Within a radius of several dozen zhang, everyone who heard those words fell silent. Even the battle cries from afar had died down significantly. Looking at the highwaymen on the ground, everyone was dumbfounded. Bastard! What nonsense are you spouting? Zhou An's face warped in shock and rage. Looking at the highwayman who had reported the news, he raised his leg and kicked him to the ground. The chief possesses unparalleled strength, and he has the protection of the metal cloak. How could he possibly die? If you continue to mislead the military advisor with your lies, I'll make an example out of you. As Zhou spoke, he unsheathed his saber and aimed it at the bandit. The chief couldn't possibly die. There was no way he could possibly die. Given his superior martial arts, and he had brought so many elite subordinates with him, how could he possibly be unable to defeat a brat and a bunch of bandits? He would never believe such ridiculous news. However, the uneasiness in his heart increased rapidly. No matter what the truth was, there was one thing Zhou was sure of. Something must have happened on the leader's side. However, even if Zhou was beaten to death, he could never imagine what had happened over there in such a short period of time, and what would happen next. Where's the jackal? Where was the long saber? Where was the fire ape? Are these bastards all dead? Why the fuck haven't they come back yet? Zhou, look at this. What's this? Just as Zhou was frightened and uneasy, a thunderous roar suddenly rang out. Amidst the rumbling sound, a black object was suddenly thrown over from the corner of the official road. That thing rolled a few times in the air before accurately stabbing into a sharp branch on the slope to the left of the official road. As the mountain wind blew, the outer layer of cloth suddenly fell apart, revealing a hideous human head with disheveled hair. Hua! Seeing the human head on the tree, the hundreds of bandits and highwaymen in the area seemed to have received a huge fright, and a deafening cry echoed in the air. Many people were so frightened that they fell down the hillside. Chief! Seeing that head, Zhou eyes were bloodshot and his eyes were bloodshot. That human head was none other than the head of the Iron Cloak highwayman, Iron Cloak Li. His eyes were wide open in fury, as if he didn't believe that he would die even at the very last moment. Zhou couldn't believe that the person who had the protection of the Iron Cloak Li and a dozen true martial realm experts would die just like that. In that instant, Zhou felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and the world around him seemed to have collapsed. Everyone, listen up. That isn't the chief, it's just a fake head. Everyone, listen up. Attack the soldiers on the slope with all your might and kill them as a blood sacrifice. If anyone dares to hold back, I'll kill him as a sacrifice. Zhou's face darkened, and he suddenly bellowed viciously. Raising a finger, he pointed at the soldiers on the slope. Zhou, that's not up to you. A voice echoed in Zhang Xian's ears. Hong Long, a group of Great Tang cavalrymen suddenly charged into the midst of the bandits and highwaymen in an arrow formation at the speed of lightning. Boom! In an instant, the crowd fell into chaos. After all of the top-notch highwaymen and bandits had been taken away, the remaining bandits and highwaymen had yet to reach true martial realm. After witnessing the might of the charge of Wang Chong and the Tang dynasty cavalrymen, there were still some who weren't fearful. This was especially so when the severed head of Iron Cloak Li was still hanging from the tree. Get out of the way. Be careful. They're here again. They really killed our chief. We need to leave. The crowd was in a state of panic. Some of them even tried to flee in panic, creating a chaotic scene. Bastard! Who dares to run? Stop right there. Zhou flew into a rage. He whipped out his saber and prepared to deal with the highwayman. But before he could make a move, a bone-chilling voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Single character consecutive slash. Wang Chong slapped the back of his steed, and his figure shot into the sky like a cannonball. After a few somersaults in the air, he pierced through the air with his sword and pierced through Zhou's neck. Wang Chong had long realized that Zhou was just a simple strategist, and his cultivation in martial arts wasn't too high. So fast. All Zhou saw was a flash of sword light before he was pierced through by Wang Chong. At the very last moment before he was pierced, Zhou saw an incomparably sharp sword with innumerable saw-teeth on its edge. It was a 3 chi long sword with intricate demonic patterns on its surface. Wuzi steel sword. In that instant, Zhou recognized the inconceivably sharp sword in Wang Chang's hand. Unlike iron cloakly, Zhou knew what the sword looked like. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Suddenly, Zhou understood what had happened. To think that. As the final thought flashed across his mind, Zhou's vision turned dark, and he lost consciousness. Zhou is here. If you dare to resist, you'll be executed along with this wretch. With a single slash, Wang Chong severed Zhou's head before standing on top of the boulder and raising it high up. Hong Long. Iron Cloakly was dead. Zhou was dead. With the death of their 2 leaders, the bandits were like dragons without a leader, causing all the bandits to instantly lose their will to fight and flee for their lives with a bang. Brothers, the time for vengeance has come. On the slope, the surviving soldiers rejoiced. The 2 groups of cavalrymen quickly gathered together and chased after the fleeing highwaymen and bandits. The several hundred bandits and highwaymen were forced to flee even faster under the pursuit of the dozens of cavalrymen and highwaymen. In just a short period of time, dozens of bandits and highwaymen were slain, lying in a pool of their own blood. Seeing how the surrounding bandits and highwaymen were being routed, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief. With so many bandits and highwaymen here, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious if they were to clash head-on. Wang Chong had made a risky move, but it was fortunate that his decapitation operation was effective. The morale of the bandits and highwaymen had already fallen into disarray, and they were already on the verge of collapse. The art of war says that attacking the heart is better than attacking the city. It seems like that's the case. Standing on top of the boulder, Wang Chong looked at the bandits and highwaymen who were being chased around him and sighed. It was just a bunch of bandits and highwaymen. In Wang Chong's life, he had faced many more formidable opponents. But without a doubt, this was the closest Wang Chong had come to death ever since his reincarnation. Bandits and highwaymen were insignificant, but when there were too many of them, they could still be fatal. To Wang Chong, this experience had left a deep impression on him. Da. Just as he was deep in thought, the hurried galloping of a horse sounded. Raising his head, Wang Chong saw a figure riding a warhorse toward Wang Chong. Lord, it's great to be able to see you all. We nearly thought that we were going to die. Lieutenant Zhang San dismounted from his horse and leaped onto the boulder that Wang Chong was standing on. His eyes were brimming with joy and excitement, but even more than that, respect. This time, their lives were saved by Wang Chong. If not for Wang Chong and the others, they would have died a long time ago. More importantly, as a soldier, Zhang San saw a kind of outstanding, extraordinary, and at the same time different commanding talent in this young man. It could even be said to be an art. Although the youth in front of him didn't have any official position and his face was slightly immature, Zhang San believed that this person's future achievements would be extremely shocking. This was what Zhang San respected as a soldier. Lieutenant Zhang San is being too polite. We serve the royal court as one. If we were in your shoes, I believe that you would have done the same. Wang Chong replied calmly. Zhang San was taken aback, and for once, he fell silent. Glancing at Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, who were still venting their anger on the battlefield, a bitter smile crept onto Zhang San's lips. If the ones who were caught in the encirclement were this lord and Bai Siling, he wouldn't be able to guarantee their safety. Wang Chong knew what Zhang San was thinking, but he simply chuckled lightly and ignored him. This wasn't a matter of whether he could save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu or not. After all, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu weren't the ones with the most manpower on the slope. If several hundred bandits and highwaymen were to suddenly go back on their word and launch a counterattack, they would be in deep trouble. Thus, even after the bandits had dispersed, the imperial army didn't stop pursuing them. Roughly an incense's time later, the scattered bandits fled into the depths of the mountain, and only then did the battle come to an end. All of the surviving cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty began to gather around the boulder where Wang Chong was. In this operation, the 80 veterans had been reduced to 40 or so. This was a significant loss, and nearly half of them had died in the hands of Iron Cloak Li. Even though Iron Cloak Li had managed to kill more than 300 highwaymen and highwaymen, including 80 true martial realm highwaymen, along with 80 highwaymen and highwaymen, Wang Chong still couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret. These precious cavalrymen should have died in the service of the empire on the battlefield, not in the hands of these highwaymen. But this was the reality. Even soldiers of the royal court would have to pay with their lives if they were to encounter a truly formidable martial artist. Chapter 359. Gallop. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, the sound of galloping suddenly vanished. Not only so, Wang Chong couldn't hear the slightest sound. It was as if the entire world had fallen silent. Surprised, Wang Chong raised his head, only to realize that all of the cavalrymen had gathered before him. At the very front of the cavalrymen were Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Bai Siling. Everyone's gazes were on him. The atmosphere had suddenly turned a little bizarre. What's wrong? Wang Chong was taken aback. Who in the world are you? Su Gan asked. His expression was grim, as if he was looking at some kind of mysterious creature. The battle has already come to an end, are you still not going to tell us? Huang Yongtu asked solemnly from the back of his steed. Don't you all know who I am? Do you want me to be someone else? Wang Chong chuckled. You know that's not what we mean. Su Gan shook his head and replied seriously. Siling, what about you? It's one thing for them, but are you going to be the same as them? Wang Chong stared at Bai Siling, who was seated beside Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Su Gan. Of course. Bai Siling rolled her eyes in exasperation. I am the one who wants to know the most, all right? It's one thing for the two of them, but I have been fighting alongside you for so long, braving through life and death, and yet, you dare to hide the truth from me? If not for the fact that I can't bring myself to lay my hands on you, I would have long lifted you up and spanked your bottom. Bai Siling gritted her teeth furiously. That darned brat had been wary of her all along the way. Even when he went up the mountain with her to deal with the bandits, he didn't do much at all. She wasn't a fool, so how could she not have sensed it? If not for the Iron Cloak highwayman forcing him to use his ability, she would have been dead by now. Bai Siling didn't even know that he was so good at commanding the cavalry. Just thinking about it makes me angry. Thus, this time, she stood by Su Gan and Huang Yongtu's side without any hesitation. This is blatant betrayal. Wang Chong said. Tisk. Bai Siling turned her head away. If I'm not mistaken, the sword in your hand should be a woozy steel sword. At this moment, Su Gan suddenly spoke up. Glancing at the sword in Wang Chong's hand, he said, this kind of saber and sword has already been copied down to 70 to 80,000 taels of gold each, and there are even over 100,000 taels of gold each. Moreover, there is no market for them. You can't possibly say that this is something that ordinary people can afford, right? As a scion of a prestigious clan, if Su Gan didn't even know of the famous woozy steel sword in the capital, he would really be blind. No matter how slow Su Gan was, he knew that Bai Siling was right. He and Huang Yongtu had misjudged the other party. Even he couldn't afford such an expensive weapon, needless to say, others. But Wang Chong simply smiled, not answering the question. Lieutenant Zhang, is that what you think as well? Wang Chong turned to the silent Lieutenant Zhang Lin and asked. It would be my honor to know your identity. As Zhang San spoke, he gave a slight military salute, his expression extremely respectful. If not for Wang Chong, he, Su Gan, and Huang Yongtu would have been wiped out by now. Thus, just like Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, Zhang Lin yearned to know Wang Chang's identity. Lieutenant Zhang, you too. Sigh, I really don't know what to do with you. Wang Chong rubbed his forehead with a pained look on his face. Putting aside the others, even Lieutenant Zhang was on their side as well. It seemed like they were working together to force Wang Chong to abdicate. From the looks of it, if he didn't give them an explanation today, they wouldn't let this matter rest. However, after all the trials and tribulations they had gone through, it wouldn't be right for him to keep his identity a secret. Alright, since you want to know so badly, I'll fulfill your wish. Wang Chong chuckled without hiding anything. Raising his robe, Wang Chong silently took out a dazzling golden token from the pouch at his waist and held it in his right hand. Boom! Seeing the token in Wang Chong's hand, everyone's eyes widened in shock. Blazing cloud, that's the token of the Wang clan. You are an offspring of the Wang clan. In that instant, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Zhang Lin, and even Bai Siling were shocked. All along, they had thought that Wang Chong was just an ordinary commoner. Yet, not only was Wang Chong's background not inferior to theirs, it was even more illustrious than theirs. Even the Su clan and Huang Yong clan couldn't compare to a clan of generals and ministers like the Wang clan. Bai Siling had a rough idea of the background of the Wang clan, but even Bai Siling didn't expect Wang Chong's background to be so illustrious. The Bai clan was definitely one of the top clans in the capital, even more so than the Su clan and Huang clan. However, even the Bai family paled in comparison to the Wang family in the capital. She didn't expect Wang Chong's background to be so illustrious. What is your relationship with Duke Zhou? Huang Yongtu asked seriously. You have really defeated me. The Wang clan was founded by the Duke Zhou you speak of, and I am an offspring of the Wang clan. What do you think our relationship is? Wang Chong rubbed his forehead. Huang Yongtu replied awkwardly. The Wang clan only has 3 offspring. The eldest son, Wang Fu, is currently serving in the military, and the second son, Wang Bei, is much younger than you. If I'm not mistaken, you should be the 3rd son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, right? Su Gan suddenly asked. Yes. Wang Chong admitted readily. Su Gan was much smarter than he had thought, guessing his identity in an instant. Hearing Wang Chong admit to it personally, a complicated look flashed across Su Gan's eyes. In the Tang dynasty, the person who had been in the limelight recently was none other than the 3rd son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong. The conflict with the Yao clan, the regional commander's incident, the Goguryeo assassins. Even the most beloved daughter of the Holy Emperor, consort Tai Zhen, had a direct or indirect relationship with Wang Chong. Thus, despite his young age, the deeds that Wang Chong had accomplished had left even Su Gan in awe. Even after traveling together for so many days, Su Gan had never imagined that the young man whom he had found an eyesore was actually the most famous person in the capital, Wang Chong. If he had known that it was Wang Chong, there was no way Su Gan would have treated him with such an attitude. He couldn't wait to befriend him. There was no one whom he couldn't befriend. Ah! I can't take it anymore. Just as Wang Chong was feeling pleased with himself, a furious voice suddenly sounded from the side. Looking at Wang Chong standing on the boulder, Bai Siling was on the verge of going berserk. Brat, how dare you fool me like that? I'll kill you. Bai Siling raised the Bai Hong sword in her hand and leaped from the back of her steed. Without a word, she charged straight for Wang Chong. Putting aside Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, even Wang Chong was taken aback. Bai Siling, what are you doing? Wang Chong executed the phantom movement art, and 3 silhouettes appeared in the blink of an eye as he dashed toward the bottom of the boulder. Boom! Sparks flew from the boulder, and shattered rocks flew in all directions. The spot where Wang Chong was standing a moment ago had a deep gash left behind by Bai Siling. The boulder shattered, and dust rose several zhang into the air. Cold sweat trickled down Wang Chong's back. That violent lady really dared to do it. Brat, don't go. Let me slash you 3 times first. Of course I'll go. The two of them, one in front and one behind, flew around the forest on the hillside. This comical sight left the crowd bursting into laughter, and the sorrowful atmosphere of losing many men in the battle lessened significantly. In the end, Bai Xiling only gave up when she ran out of strength. After all, Iron Cloak Li's 2 palm strikes weren't easy to deal with. If not for her superior cultivation and powerful stellar energy, she would have been killed by Iron Cloak Li by now. I'll settle the score with you once I recover. Bai Xiling sat on the boulder and pointed a finger at Wang Chong as she panted heavily. You're welcome anytime. Wang Chong chuckled. Even though they had been chased all over the mountain by Bai Xiling, after revealing their identities, the group seemed to have gotten much closer. What should we do next? What should we do with the corpses of the soldiers? We can't possibly just leave them exposed there, right? After everyone had calmed down, Su Gan suddenly asked. Let's bury them together. I wish to give them a proper burial. At the very least, their corpses won't be left in the wilderness. It was Bai Xiling, who was resting on the boulder, who said those words with a hint of sorrow in her eyes. After all, they were comrades who had fought side by side with her. It was hard for her to bear the loss of so many of them. There's no need for that. Wang Chong shook his head dispiritedly. Let them be. Inform the Bureau of Military Personnel of this matter, and they'll send people over to collect the corpses as soon as possible. The families of the soldiers who died in battle will be compensated, and their children will be given preferential treatment. The Bureau of Military Personnel will also record their names down, and they will be treated as soldiers who have died on the battlefield. This is the best ending for a soldier. Zhang Lin looked at Wang Chang's back with a hint of astonishment in his eyes. But thinking about Wang Chang's background, it made sense. Wang Gongzi is right. This is the way our brothers want to die, an honorable death. Zhang Lin nodded. In this world, there were some who could live to the end of their lives, but there were others who could only die on the battlefield. If there were people who could enjoy peace, there would be people who would silently protect them. From the moment they stepped onto the battlefield, they were already prepared to die. But I don't think the Bureau of Military Personnel will agree to it. After all, Su Gan said hesitantly. Even though Su Gan didn't finish his words, Wang Chong already understood what he was trying to say. Don't worry. They will agree to it. I will make them agree to it. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.